Can't help myself. We ready? Good evening. My name is Charles Sindel. I am chairperson of the Webster Rose Plan Commission. We are a 9-member board of citizens appointed by the city council to review development proposals and make recommendations to the city council regarding future development of the city. In addition to the members of the Plan Commission participating in person or via teleconference, we have a few other representatives of the city I'd like to introduce. Councilmember Bliss, City Attorney Neil Brunschweiger, Planning and Development Director Mara Perry, and Planner Danny Jandusa. And Denise Bielski is our recording secretary. I would like to welcome you all to tonight's monthly meeting of the commission and take this opportunity to explain how we operate. As indicated in our agenda, we will begin with the regular session of the meeting when we will hear new applications for rezoning or subdivisions. We will hear a staff report and the applicant will explain the proposal. We will then ask for comments from the public. At that time, anyone with an interest in the proposal may indicate to city staff they have a question or would like to express their opinion by clicking the raise hand feature on Zoom. To make sure that we accurately record your name, we ask that you identify your full name and address at the beginning of your comment. When you make your comments, we ask that you be as concise as possible and not repeat points made by other speakers. We also ask that you limit your time to 3 minutes per person. A spokesperson for an organization may have 6 minutes to comment. After all citizens have spoken, the applicant will be asked to respond to any questions that have been raised during the hearing. When we have finished reviewing one proposal, we will move on to the next application. Comments concerning items that are not on the agenda should be made during the public comment section of the agenda near the beginning of the meeting. When we have completed the regular portion of the agenda, we will go into executive session. At that time, the commission will discuss the proposal and may decide to vote on the application or to postpone the decision. You are welcome to remain and listen to the discussion, but there'll be no additional opportunity for public comment at that time. Tonight, we will vary from our standard procedures and go into executive session to vote on items on the agenda prior to going into our last hearing. Our recommendations are sent to the city council. In most cases, the city council will conduct a similar hearing and must enact an ordinance before the proposal is finally approved. If the plan commission takes a vote tonight, the city council will likely take up the issue at its first meeting next month. If you want more information regarding our vote or the progress of the application, you may contact staff at City Hall. And now I would like the acting secretary to read the first item on tonight's regular agenda meeting.
Approval of minutes, June 7, 2021 meeting.
Are there any comments regarding the minutes of the June 7, 2021 meeting?
I did have a comment,
All right.
question of my hearing. So I'm on the third page, the very bottom there. Of that comment, it says, please do not remove the CUP process for these commercial districts. Is that right?
What is it?
That makes sense.
Oh, that was a comment from a citizen stating that he wished that the city would not remove the CUP process for adding multifamily in commercial districts last meeting.
Okay, but that wasn't something discussed.
No, that was a resident's comment and that was the extent of
Okay,
discussion.
thank you.
Natty, we're just discussing the minutes. Oh, okay. Is there a motion regarding the minutes of the June 7th meeting?
I make motion to approve.
I'll second.
Been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of the June 7th, 2021 meeting. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Is there anyone opposed? So next item.
Public comment.
This is an opportunity for members of the public to comment on items that are not on tonight's agenda. Do you have anybody?
We do not have any raised
hands?
no raised hands at this point.
All right, next item, please.
Public hearing, 21 PC 06, Play Days, 739 Marshall Avenue. An application by Playdays LLC for conditional use permit to allow a child daycare center use in the existing structure located on an 0.17 acre lot at 739 Marshall Avenue in the C Commercial District.
You gonna present, Dan?
Yes.
All right.
So the applicant is proposing, requesting a conditional use permit to operate a child daycare center in a C commercial district at the corner of Marshall Avenue and Summit Avenue, the small commercial strip at that corner. The subject property is located, is a C commercial district zoning. The properties directly to the north are zone A4 7,500 square foot residence district. They're single family uses primarily. And then to the east, south and west are zone C commercial district with other various commercial uses and a little bit of two-family and multifamily development. The applicant is seeking to utilize the first floor commercial space in the existing facilities at 739 Marshall Avenue. It's the commercial bay on the right-hand side of that building. Looking into a little bit of the zoning history for the site, it has been zoned commercial use since the city's first zoning map in 1923. The area has existed as a small, mostly pedestrian-oriented commercial district built up in the late 19th century and early 20th century around the former streetcar line that was located here. So the area has existed as commercial development throughout its entirety. Most recently, this specific space has been leased for small office uses, small retail uses, and an upholstery shop. The city looks to the comprehensive plan to inform its zoning decisions. This specific piece of property is not going through a rezoning process. However, we did look at the comprehensive plan for its long-term recommendations. The comprehensive plan serves as a guide to inform official policy decisions. The 2017 comprehensive plan map recommended office use of the subject property. Because it's not going through a full rezoning and a conditional use permit, therefore is only looking at the recommendation, staff determined that child daycare use would still be an allowable and appropriate use within the subject property's commercial designation, according to the comprehensive plan. The specific zoning regulations that would apply to this use in the C commercial district are in section 53.116 in the development standards for daycare and group living uses. It states that the lot for a daycare use must meet the minimum area requirements, minimum width requirements at the front yard setback line, minimum average width requirements for the zone that it is located. The C commercial district does not have minimum area and lot width requirements for basic commercial type uses. However, the standards also state that off-street parking shall be provided for the owner, operator, and any employee and anyone parking for more than 2 hours. A daycare center use is actually a permitted use with these development standards in the C commercial district. But because the because the subject property does not contain that required off-street parking, it is necessary for it to come before you and the city council to request a conditional use permit before it can open. Per the code requirements for obtaining a conditional use permit, the council shall determine whether the proposed use will not substantially increase traffic hazards or congestion. Number 2, substantially increase fire hazards. Number 3, adversely affect the character of the neighborhood. Number 4, adversely affect the general welfare of the community. Or 5, overtax public utilities. If the planning commission and city council find that the applicant has failed to carry its burden in any one of these areas, the planning commission should recommend against approval of the conditional use permit. The applicant, again, is seeking to operate what is defined as a child daycare center use in our code. They intend to provide for up to 20 children per session in the morning and afternoon, Mondays through Fridays. They'd be having 2 sessions, 1 3-hour morning session and 1 3-hour afternoon session. The applicant would be operating in the existing facilities, which encompass approximately 1,000 square feet. That would be divided into 2 general classroom spaces between younger children and older children. Children ages would be from 2 to 5 years old. The applicant has indicated they would use the rear yard of the property for an outdoor play area that would be required per the state licensing requirements, and that they would have 3 staff persons on both shifts of the day. Prior to operating, the applicant understands that business must be approved by the Missouri Department of Health and Senior Services through their licensing requirements, and they must also renew their city license for a daycare center annually. For their city license, they would be needing to meet the city's health and safety and fire code requirements. For hours of operation, they'd be seeking to have, again, 2 sessions per day with up to 20 children in each session. The morning session would run from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. The afternoon session would run from 12 p.m. to 3 p.m. To provide greater flexibility, staff would recommend allowing expanded hours should they modify their plans in the future. That would be, I believe, from 7 or 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. The C commercial district also includes standard performance standards that would regulate certain externalities impacting neighboring properties like levels of noise, vibration, odor, smoke, and other factors. Staff would recommend just adhering to the standard performance standards in the district that all other commercial uses should follow. And commercial signage would also be permitted for the proposed use in accordance with the standard Chapter 54 regulations, and staff would not recommend placing additional requirements on signage at this location. Looking back again to the key item of parking, though, per section 53.116, it states in the standards that off-street parking should be provided for the owner operator plus any employee and anyone parking for more than 2 hours. This would, because the applicant said that they would have 3 full-time staff, this would require a minimum of 3 off-street parking spaces. And the subject property does not currently include any off-street parking facilities. Businesses and residents along the stretch of Marshall Avenue mostly share access to the approximately 12 on-street parking spaces that are located on the North Street curb. A few of the businesses in the area have added private parking for their own facilities over the years, but the commercial strip was not developed for automobile traffic, and no public lots or significant shared parking facilities have been constructed in the area. So the applicant has indicated in their application that staff would be utilizing on-street parking, and they would instruct parents to queue vehicles at the intersection of Summit Avenue and Marshall Avenue. You can kind of see that intersection on the right-hand side of the photo during the pickup and drop-off times. Because this is a non-conforming structure without existing parking facilities, similar type uses such as office and retail that it's had for a long period of time, allowed to sort of be grandfathered in without requiring additional off-street parking, unless the structure is being used for a more intense use or a standard that requires more unique parking standards. And the parking requirements, traffic impacts of a daycare use are unique from your standard retail and office tenants that have been in this location in the past, where you'll get a very brief influx of parking and traffic need of parents wanting to drop their kids off all at the same time or pick up near the same time. So can have a significant impact on the surrounding community. In this particular location on Marshall Avenue serves as only one of two east-west corridors to travel between Brentwood Boulevard and Kirkham up to Laclede Station Road and Big Bend for several blocks, Marshall Avenue and Newport Avenue, and carries a significant amount of traffic for the neighborhood. So due to the number of children that the applicant intends to provide care for without reserved off-street parking, staff believes this would present likely increased traffic congestion and adversely affect the neighborhood during the morning commute hours.
Danny?
Sure.
Sorry to interrupt you. What's the last thing you just said? I just want to make sure I heard.
Oh, I'm sorry. We believe that the request would increase traffic congestion and adversely impact the neighborhood without preparations for off-street parking.
Thank you. Sorry.
Sure. Therefore, staff recommends requiring the applicant to provide a minimum of 3 off-street parking spaces within 300 feet of the subject property through private parking lease agreements as a condition to the approval of their requested use. And the 3 parking spaces, staff believes this would be a minimum needed to meet the code requirements at Plan Commission or City Council discretion. That number may be increased if you believe this. The impacts of the number of children they're seeking to serve would necessitate more off-street parking. Action on, before going through the recommendations, just a reminder that action on the conditional use permit would be in the form of motion for approval, approval of the conditions, or approval with conditions set by the Plan Commission, or denial. If the motion is for approval, the City Council and Plan Commission should find that the 5 factors for approval of the CUP are met. Before I go through staff's recommendations for an ordinance, were there any questions I could clarify?
Danny, I had a question in the staff report. If I can find it again, my apologies. It discusses as policy when reviewing repurposing existing facilities. City code only requires new users and older non-conforming structures with little to no parking to provide additional parking facilities if it would generate additional parking demands. So as policy, the phrase as policy means per our code.
Yes, it is in the code.
It is codified. Okay.
That if you're changing from one use to a similar level of intense use, then you are not required to modify your parking at all. But if you have, say, a small office space, and then you'd be looking to convert that into a restaurant space that has much greater parking demand, then our code requires that you have to somehow provide that parking or come up with parking arrangements.
All right. I just wanted to clarify that. That wasn't just practice. It's actually in our code.
Correct.
What was there before?
So it has been used for small office spaces, small retail spaces, and a small upholstery shop. Those actually in our code for the size of this facility also only require 3 off-street parking spaces because it's historically, hasn't had the parking that is required in the code. It's still been allowed to have commercial occupancy as long as it's remained at that, level of intensity over the years. But so even though this request, the standards for a daycare use also would only require 3 parking spaces according to the code, staff believes the actual traffic and parking impacts of this type of use are greater than those 3 necessarily than how the space has been functioning in the past with employees able to park throughout the day on the street because there is a significant need for parking and drop-off area for parents.
Is the drop-off area that's being proposed, it's at the corner of Summit and Marshall?
Correct.
Is the drop off going to be on Summit or on Marshall?
I think the applicant would need to kind of clarify that because I wasn't sure. I think they were intending that it would be on Summit Avenue, heading north.
Is that a safe, area to drop kids off? Are they going to have to be walked down to the facility? And then that's going to entail parking, is it not?
Correct. I believe the state requirements would require that parents actually walk their child into the center for an intake process. And it would be, it could be hectic at that time of the morning, and could present safety concerns.
And then the 3 spots that the applicant has, do you know where those are located?
The applicant does not have any reserved
Doesn't
parking
have,
available.
okay.
There's just the 12, public shared parking spaces, public on-street parking spaces on Marshall.
But your recommendation is they obtain 3 off street,
Yes, at least 3 off-street parking spaces.
but you don't know where those are.
The applicant would need to figure that out.
You said the 300 feet, getting well ahead, I guess. Into your
Yes,
recommendations. How far does 300 feet go? Does that go all the way to Maypop?
It does. It would include all of the properties to the, just past the intersection of Marshall and Summit
Then the one
Avenue.
on the south side. too.
Yes, it would include, it could include all of the existing surface parking facilities in that area.
So in the parking in the past, when it was an office, we didn't require the 3 spaces for them to find an off.
Correct, because it's always been used for a low intensity office use.
But is the main concern the drop off and pickup of the children, which would be 4 times a day?
Correct.
9 AM and noon. And 1.
Correct.
That's
Noon's-
noon,
noon's
so you'd
double.
at noon, you'd have 40, potentially 40 cars.
Yeah.
No, because the other one's 1. So it
Well,
would be-
It was,
It's
it's
noon.
9 to noon and noon to 3.
Yeah.
Oh.
So there could be a significant transition point at midday, yeah.
And it's a staff recommendation for 3 spots. Is that for 3 spots for the employees?
Yeah.
Or is that what you're contemplating? Or you,
I referenced 3 spaces to meet the bare minimum requirements for, that's recommended in the code. I think it might be necessary to require more than 3, depending on, plan commission's discretion in order to accommodate the employees as well as parents dropping off. I think theoretically, it could be that employees are still able to park on the street, maybe parking further away, like commercial office users have used this space in the past. But that there would need to be some level of off-street parking for parents to be able to drop off and pick up.
Would that be in the state requirements that they have to?
Don't believe there is anything in the state requirements about specific parking locations.
And where did that 300 feet come from, Danny?
That is sort of a standard number in our, for accessory parking uses. If somebody is looking to have sort of a satellite parking lot, 300 feet is that standard. And when I did the measurements, 300 feet included all of the nearby surface parking at that business district. So
Seemed like a bit of a long way, and I like to walk, but.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you know about what time the other offices in the area, what their hours of operation are?
I do not. I think they're generally, I believe they're generally daytime users, but I don't know that.
I mean, would their drop off, say that if the businesses weren't open, then maybe some of those parking spots wouldn't be, the employees at those businesses wouldn't be occupying those parking spaces if they opened later or something.
Correct. But I don't know what that overlap with other uses in the district are.
Is the parking there 2-hour parking only? Signage?
I
Or
don't
is it
believe it's
just-
limited. I think it's
So Tony, to help a little bit with that, we've had a number of requests to the police department to try to designate areas because there has been a lack of parking. They did look through the code, especially because it actually has in the code, it's a reverse. It actually says that they should be parking on the south side of the street, not the north side. So I know they were going to do a cleanup in the code to make sure that it identified the correct area. But we've had requests for residents just to the west to have a handicap spot because they do not, they have a hard time finding on-street parking when the businesses are operating during the day.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else remote? Got any questions? So
Is
you're-
Terry
you're-
on the call?
I'm sorry.
Okay.
The applicant is on the call.
Okay.
I think before we go to the applicant, I would just run through states or staff's ordinance recommendations. Unless there's other questions first.
I have a question for Terry, so I think I'll wait to hear what she says and then,
Okay.
okay.
So should the plan commission recommend approval of the CUP, staff would recommend placing the following conditions within the ordinance. That all provisions of the city code shall apply except as expressly modified in the CUP ordinance. That total enrollment shall not exceed 20 children. In the staff report, I didn't include stating that this should be per morning or afternoon session. Number 3, that the hours of operation shall be limited to 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday. Number 4, that prior to operating the child daycare center, the applicant must be approved by the Missouri Department of Health and Senior Services, and a city daycare license shall be provided from the city clerk's office. Number 5, that the applicant shall secure a minimum of 3 off-street parking spaces within 300 feet of the subject property through private parking lease agreements. Number 6, that the conditional use permit shall be personal to the owner and shall not run with the land.
One more question I forgot to ask you. What kind of notices went out to the businesses and who actually gets noticed?
So-
Area wise.
All property owners and tenants within 185 feet of the requested use. So I don't believe that actually covered all businesses on that strip.
And what's the notice they receive? Do they get something in the mail or do they get?
Yes, it's a notice in the mail simply stating that this is requested and this is the meeting details.
And have you had any objections to this? proposal?
Charlie, I'm going to have you make sure to speak.
Oh, I'm sorry. Have you had any objections to it?
We have received some public comments that I can read after the applicant gets their
Okay.
chance.
All right.
And there may be additional residents to comment online.
Okay. Anybody else have anything? Who's here for the applicant? Or they are on there?
They are on Zoom, and the applicant is Terry Oliphant. So I'm going to move her over as a panelist. Terry, can you hear us?
She's muted. Isn't she?
Okay, I'm at- Can they see me? Hi there, this is Terry Oliphant. And I'd like to clarify the drop off and pickup situation. So we're gonna have a staff member at the corner. And, we'll gather the children. They walk them up to the school and so that the traffic can flow in all of the directions and that they won't be parking. They'll just be dropping off at the drop off and pickup time.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand. Are you saying that a staff member will escort the children in?
Yes. We'll have a line, they'll get in a line and they'll walk up with a teacher up to the school at Summit and Marshall.
Which corner and which direction?
So going south on Summit at the corner there on the west side of, so parents will pull up. The parents don't even get out of the car. We'll just get the children and line up, and then we walk up to the school.
So this would be southbound on Summit, north of Marshall?
Is that right?
So they wouldn't have to cross any traffic, it'd just go right.
No, the children won't cross the street, no.
Terry, what,
Yes,
hi, what if a parent needs to come inside the building? Will they just park on the street?
yes, but they would need to call ahead, let us know they were coming. There's not going to be anybody allowed to just walk out. But like say a child needs to leave early for a doctor's appointment or arrive late or something like that, they can park and walk them in.
Okay,
But the doors will be locked, so they won't, people can't just come in and out.
totally. Okay.
Is there parking along that street where they're getting dropped off, or are they?
On the,
On Summit, I don't believe there's parking. I was looking down there, we've looked several times, but it's a nice place for cars to pull up and flow out.
so on the west side of Summit Avenue, on that portion, it's a no parking zone
Can you
currently.
show them?
Maybe, if you can kind of see
Yeah.
on the
Yeah.
west side of Summit Avenue is currently a no parking zone from Marshall to, I think, about Eunice. And then there is on-street parking on the east side,
Other side of the street.
on the other side of Summit Avenue. So it's
It's kind of wide.
On the east side of Summit.
on the, yes, on the northbound side of Summit Avenue, there is,
That
On-street
area
parking.
is dated, right? Because that's all, that Maypop, it's all paved and with the greenhouse back there. So is there,
yes,
is
so
it
yes,
still
this,
like that? Because in an entrance there to Maypop, right there.
there are a few on-street parking spaces.
no.
The new parking lot
This is
for Maypop isn't shown on this aerial, but, and there's like a curb cut on that side of the street. But there are a couple on-street parking spaces on the
Between
Maypop
curb
side.
cut and the corner.
Yeah. And then going down the rest of the street is also on-street parking. But currently there is no, it's a no parking zone on the west side of Summit Avenue.
So they could park on the east side of it across the street.
That could be possible.
Do the, I have a different question, but maybe you guys.
I got a couple questions.
Okay. Are the AM and the PM, do they overlap the kids? Like, are some of the same 20 kids in the morning, the same 20 kids from the 12 to 3, or are they different groups?
Some of them will overlap and some of them will be a new group.
Okay. So I was just thinking about, is it 40 people coming at once?
No, and we'll,
Some of them, I'm sure, are from the same family.
yeah, we will have to stagger that, so that doesn't happen.
And how does pickup work then? Just normal pickup?
The same way, then we dismiss, we line up and head down and we'll load in the cars and stuff, get them on their way.
So do all the kids come out at once?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Do all the kids come out at once?
Yes,
So under that drop off and pickup scenario, if you were headed south on Summit, wouldn't you be in a no parking zone? You'd be lining up, cars would be lining up in a no parking zone on the west side there?
They're not going to be parking. They're just going to be stopping and then moving on.
And how is it that you know that they're out there?
Because we'll be out there and we have a certain pickup and drop off and pickup time. I've, you know, this is not my first rodeo. I've been doing this for years.
What are the ages? So
2 years to 5 years.
Do you have any problem with the recommendations of the city?
Do I?
Yes.
Well, we're wondering about the 3 spaces. Well, I guess before. Oh, that,
I just want to
so
know.
have the businesses in the past, have they had to have 3 parking spots? 3 parking spaces?
no, but they also didn't have 20 people coming in and 20 people going out 2 times a day.
Okay.
Do you have a problem with 3 parking spaces? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I just was wondering why it was required of us and not other businesses, you know?
Good question.
Ms. Oliver, so because this, district was built without parking, and it has always had, certain low levels of office or small level retail, it's a non-conforming use if it doesn't have the parking, but because it's always operated under those conditions, our city code allows it to continue to operate at that, low level of service and operations without needing to, find or build off-street parking. But our code says that if there is any kind of increase in the intensity of a proposed use or activity at a site, then that use needs to meet the off-street parking requirements. So.
Okay.
Terry, you mentioned this isn't your first rodeo. Your description of services indicates you're an established nursery school. Could you would you speak to, I guess, where you're currently established?
Well, we don't have a location right now. COVID put us out, but we were at 10 West Lockwood in the First Congregational Church of Webster Groves for 5 years. We had 2 classrooms there. And we did pick up and drop off, like that. It was not a problem. So back in March of 2020, and COVID hit, they closed the church, and we haven't been back. So we've been looking for a new space in Webster. We would like to stay in Webster.
Okay, thank you.
And I see you have not obtained the 3 off-street parking spots as of now, is that correct?
You do anything about it?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Not have the 3 parking spots as of this evening, is that right?
Yeah, we didn't know anything about that until just now.
Any other questions?
Terry, what about inclement weather? Like if it's raining or snowing? Because when I pick up my son, sometimes I'm the first one there, or usually I don't want to be the last one, but parents don't always get there at the same time. So from your business, can you physically see the cars coming by? Or how does that work?
Well, it works that because we have certain pickup and drop off times. So, I mean, if somebody's going to be late or early, they wouldn't need to notify us. But, you know, since there is we do the same thing every day. We have a routine of packing, you know, getting our backpacks, lining up at the door and heading out. And then, so I'm not gonna be keeping an eye on who is arriving. It's just, if you're, you know, pickup time is at 12, then everybody should be there at 12. We have the kids out ready to go. And inclement weather, you know, you just have to dress for it. That's what we do. We put on a raincoat and get an umbrella and we'll walk them in. If it's, you know, icy and the weather's bad or something, then, you know, we follow the Webster Groves school district, the inclement weather policy. And so, you know, if it's too icy, then we close as well. So, you know, but other than that, we will just walk them up.
What
It's
do you
just,
do late?
I'm sorry,
What do you do if someone's late to pick up their child?
if they're late to pick up, then they would let us know that they were late, and we, you know, depending on how late they were, we just walk the child back to the classrooms, or just stand there and wait.
Terry, how far is the walk from like the drop off of the car to your business? Is it like
It's like 3 storefronts, probably.
3 storefronts? Okay, that's what I was.
It's not a long walk.
Okay.
Have you spoken with any of the adjacent, you know, store owners or fronts to secure 3 off-street parking places?
No, I have not, because I didn't know that was required until this meeting.
Would you be,
But
are you
leasing from
agreeable to doing that? Do you think you could get that done?
yeah, for sure.
Have you communicated with the state? Are you gonna be able to meet all the regulations that the state's gonna have? for you?
Yes, yeah, for sure.
So you did talk to somebody?
Yes, I'm always in talks with them. Yes. I have a caseworker with the state. We meet on Thursday, in fact, to go over plans. And then they come in and do an inspection, an initial inspection. They let us know like what we need with health and sanitation, from fire department and the fire marshal, and as well as my state representative, to make sure, you know, we're all safe and healthy. I've been in touch with all of them.
Anybody else have questions?
Terry, what made you select this location and not other ones? What drew you to this spot?
Well, we've been diligently looking, and you know, we just thought it would be great. That spot would be great. It's got a nice big window, and you know, it's got a great outside space, and you know, I feel like it's just a good location. I like the location. A lot of places that we've looked, it's been hard because there hasn't been an outside space. You know, other places that we have looked at, you know, storefronts or other facilities, there has not been an outside space for the children. So, and that's required by the state. So.
Any more questions, anybody? Anyone public comments?
Sure. We did have several emails received from neighbors and residents. A few of them requested that staff read them into the public record, and others indicated they may attend the meeting to speak for themselves. So I'll read the first comment received from Melissa Harlan on July 2nd. It stated, "I received notice of the application for a conditional use permit at 739 Marshall Avenue. I live at 754 Eunice and have questions regarding the center in relation to traffic congestion and parking issues. With the rezoning of the Maypop property 3 to 4 years ago, we have seen increased traffic congestion and parking issues. I am worried that a childcare center will further strain the streets and parking. Here are my questions. What hours will the childcare center be open? What is the maximum number of children that will attend? How many teachers, staff will the center have? Where will teachers and staff park? Where will parents park for drop off and pickup? I would like to understand these operational issues and know that the owner and city have a plan that will not further encroach on resident parking and will not increase traffic on Summit and side streets, including Eunice Avenue. In conjunction with this project, I would ask the city to consider the following: resident-only parking within the surrounding residential neighborhood, signage to the public parking on Dutton Avenue, speed regulation on Summit Avenue, including but not limited to speed bumps, humps, or tables. We have people driving too fast on Summit, but Marshall is also a problem." In a follow-up email, Ms. Harlan stated today, "I will not be able to attend this evening as our 4-year-old requires my attention. Please read my comments to ensure that parking and traffic congestion are addressed. It sounds like they expect parents to queue in their cars on southbound Summit between Marshall and Eunice. This seems extremely problematic." And she attached a diagram to point out the street on the parking on Summit Avenue. "I think a daycare would be a good addition to the neighborhood, but drop off and pickup must be addressed in a realistic manner that does not negatively impact its neighbors." The second comment was received on July 11th. Actually, this individual said that they would attend, so I'll hold his comment until we get a chance to hear from him. Another comment was received from Hillary Tobias Chetta this morning. Said, "Dear Webster Grove City Council, hello, I'm writing in support of Playdays move to 739 Marshall Avenue. Terry Oliphant and her co-teacher, Mr. Sam, have been working hard since March 2020 to be able to create a safe learning and caring space for little ones who have needed it. Through all the surprises over the last year, Terry has managed to sustain a healthy environment for families who have been unable to work and care for their little ones at home. I'm sure you know the past year has been especially hard on working parents, and it has been very comforting to be able to trust Playdays to keep my toddler healthy and happy. Transitions are exceptionally difficult for toddlers, and Terry has managed to make this transition virtually tantrum-free for my family. The space at 739 Marshall would be a perfect opportunity to let Playdays move forward and continue to grow their family post-pandemic. Please give us this opportunity to show Playdays the same grace and enthusiasm to accommodate that Terry has shown the Webster Groves community in the past year. Thank you for your time and work." Another comment from Amy Whistler. It was received this morning via email. "My name is Amy Whistler. I have lived in our community for 10 years. I'm raising my children here who attend Avery Elementary, and previously I was a business owner in Webster prior to having my last child. I love our community. My youngest child has attended Playdays since he was 2 years old and will be moving on to kindergarten this year. Where Playdays ends up will have zero impact on us. Having said that, I want to express how strongly I support that she be allowed to move to the property on Marshall. She is a responsible business owner who has been an asset to our community for many years. During the pandemic, she supported families in the community by offering preschool at a park, and then scrambled again to modify her home in order to accommodate the ever-changing circumstances. Terry and her team are absolutely wonderful, lovely people who will only serve to elevate our community and provide love and care for the next generation of community members. Please vote in favor of allowing her to open business on Marshall so she can resume building her wonderful business."
Was there an address on it?
There is no address provided. This next comment was sent via email from Eric Johnson this afternoon. to Webster Grove City Plan Commission. With regard to 21 PC 06, the application by Playdays LLC for a conditional use permit, we are concerned about the proposed business impacts on the neighborhood, specifically substantial increases in traffic hazards and congestion and adverse effects on the character and general welfare of a predominantly residential neighborhood. Number one, as cited in the City Plan Commission staff report, the staff analysis regarding parking and traffic is of concern. There is currently insufficient parking on Marshall Avenue in the area of the proposed facility. At 8 a.m. on Monday, July 12th, there were less than 4 curbside parking spaces along the storefronts of 700 Marshall, with the spaces directly in front of the proposed site occupied. There are 2 driveways for the commercial buildings interspersed with the parking spots. We contend the applicant and the city have significantly underestimated the amount of traffic at Marshall and Summit intersection and on surrounding streets. The current traffic levels are not reflective of and are substantially below pre-pandemic traffic levels, even with the additional traffic generated by the Maypop shop. We expect traffic will return to pre-pandemic very busy levels with traffic backups for east and westbound traffic routinely on weekdays as a result of in-person classes at schools and employees returning to workplaces. We are concerned the addition of up to 20 cars twice a day and up to 40 cars around noon forming a vehicle queue to drop off pickup children would substantially increase traffic hazards to drivers and pedestrians and traffic congestion. The applicant indicated that parents will be instructed to form a vehicle queue along Summit Avenue for drop off and pickup, resulting in 20 vehicles and up to 40 vehicles midday. We are concerned that parents will seek out short-term parking on the neighboring residential streets for their drop off and pickup times, adding to the congestion. Given an average of 20 feet of space for vehicle parking, 20 to 40 vehicles queued up equals approximately 480 feet of roadway necessary for parents to form a vehicle queue. Summit Avenue north of Marshall allows parking only on the east and northbound sides of the roads, and it's too narrow to allow parking on both sides of the road. Presumably vehicles will line up on Summit Avenue south of Marshall. Residential driveways exiting directly onto Summit occur south of Marshall Avenue. The commission's notice was sent out to residents only within 185 feet of their proposed business. We believe that the residents along the affected area of Summit have not been included in this notice and are unaware of the proposed new business and its impact. Also noted in the Planning Commission staff recommendations is the requirement for the applicant to secure 3 off-street parking spaces. What happens if the applicant fails to secure this parking? There are inconsistencies in the applicant's proposed use. In the Playdays mission statement, they state they are able to care for children from 18 months to 5 years. In their description of services, they state that they are an established nursery school for children from 2 years to 5 years. What will be the ages of children? This will drive the facilities required by Missouri Department of Health and Senior Services. The applicant must provide a sufficient outdoor play area per Missouri. The applicant's sketch of the outdoor play area indicates that the space would be fenced off portion of the rear yard to the side of the existing wooden deck. Will the applicant be required to comply with Webster Grove's fencing requirements? The property lot dimension is only 50 feet wide. The area described in the sketch could not be more than 15 feet wide by 50 foot deep. The estimated space of the play area would not likely meet the state's required 75 square feet per child. Sincerely, Sandra Skall and Eric Johnson at 736 Eunice Avenue. That's the end of our written comments. Are there any members of the public who'd like to speak on the proposal? Please click the raise your hand button on the Zoom. We have one this time. It is Leah O'Donnell, and I'm promoting her to a panelist now. Leah, can you hear us? Leah, can you hear us?
It's actually Patrick. Can you hear me?
Yes. Go ahead.
Okay. Real quick. Hi, Neil Brunschreiger. It's good to see your face. I'll just read the letter that I wrote, the email that I wrote, and then be quick and done. So I wrote, I am writing you in response to a letter that I received as a homeowner in the vicinity to a proposed daycare center at 739 Marshall Avenue. I have several reservations regarding this plan, which I have outlined below. Please let me know if you have any questions or comments regarding my input to this matter. Thank you, Patrick O'Donnell. Since Maypop was granted business space at the corner of Summit and Marshall, the traffic has increased exponentially. There is also a parking issue that has arisen from this business, which has patrons' vehicles parking on the surrounding residential streets. When that business receives deliveries, the semi trucks block lanes of Summit sometimes, as well as Marshall. Marshall has been a cut-through street for those navigating between Brentwood and Hanley/Laclede for as long as I have lived here, which is 20 years. The issue with that type of non-resident traffic is that drivers speed down the street. I personally witness on a daily basis individuals running the stop sign at that four-way intersection. This is not safe for children to be around, as is evident by the child that was struck by a car traveling down Marshall on their way to Margaret Park. I have thought for as long as I have lived here that Marshall Avenue needs a heavier police presence to ticket these drivers, speed bumps installed at all intersecting roads, and or mark Marshall one way during business hours to cut down on cut-through traffic. I realize that Marshall/Summit block is residential and commercially zoned, and historically, there has always been a diverse business residential blend in that area. However, I have seen in 22 years a much younger crowd move into this section of Webster Groves, and at current, it is a young area right now with a good amount of children in the neighborhood. We do not have the luxury on this side of Webster of sidewalks on the inner streets. And because of that, children and adults, for that matter, are accustomed to walking on the street in this part of Webster. I think the addition of pickup and drop-off traffic for a daycare center poses a threat to the surrounding children and adult pedestrian and bike traffic. Before a daycare facility should be considered for this area, Webster needs to improve the infrastructure to support the added traffic and make it safer for children in the area. In summation, I am in opposition to the daycare proposal and would like to see the city make the street more safe before considering any type of business that adds to the already heavy traffic pattern and lack of parking in this area. The cut-through traffic during business hours makes this a dangerous street, with the Summit and Marshall intersection being especially dangerous. That's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other members of the public on Zoom that would like to make a public comment? And she on? The applicant is not on. I can move her back over if you have.
So she hasn't heard any of this?
Oh, she is, but she's not.
I want to know if she
able to
has any
speak at
comments
this
to the
point.
comments.
Would you like me to bring her over so she can respond? Okay.
Yes.
Ms. Oliphant, would you like to reply to any of the comments?
I don't intend on having 40 cars at one time showing up. That's just never how it's been, you know. We'll bring some in, cars will flow out, we'll bring more kids in, and cars will flow out. And it'll be safe. They're not going to be walking up there alone. They'll be walking with a teacher. I also want to clarify that it's not a daycare center. We're not opening a daycare center. This is a nursery school / preschool. There is a difference. So there's not going to be a lot of people needing to park. You know, they're dropping off. I think it would be a benefit to the community in the surrounding areas for play days to open on Marshall Avenue. I think it would be great for the community, for the families. A lot of these families live in Webster. It's close. You know, they have families that go to Avery. It's convenient for a lot of the people in our community.
Ms. Hovan, how many employees do you have total?
I have 2 and 3, including myself. There's 2 other employees.
For the 3 parking spaces, if you acquired them, that would be for your employees and there would be no other employee that needed a place to park, is that right?
Correct.
Anybody else have any questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much for your time.
At this point, I think we take a motion to close the public hearing and move this to executive session.
Or do we need to do?
Have we went through the staff's comments,
Pardon me?
the staff suggestions?
We've already gone through staff suggestions. So when you go to the executive session, you would further discuss them.
Laura, are there any plats or site plans?
No,
That's technically next. That's technically next before we.
there are no. And remember, we're going to go back out of executive session to go back to the other hearing.
All right, so do we have a motion to close this regular session on 21 PC 06 and move to executive session? Again, just on 21 PC 06. So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Is there anyone opposed? All right, we're in executive session now on 21 PC 06. I got a question for staff. Would it make any difference if she got an additional spot or 2? It doesn't seem to me that would make any difference. If all of our employees are parking on our street and everybody else is just dropping off.
I think it potentially could provide, some location for cars to be able to pull in and drop off and, move quickly through that process. I don't think it's necessary to require those 3 off-street parking spaces be utilized for employees, and if that could be made available for parent drop off, that the number could be increased above 3 if Plan Commission thought that would help more.
Well, presumably she's gonna have to pay for these spots.
Correct, and
And she's
so
gonna be paying for a spot that's gonna be used for 2 minutes or.
Not if it's the employee.
Well, the employees, I'm totally in favor of employees having to be.
So where you're heading, George, maybe might I suggest not the additional parking, but perhaps one of the recommendations be included in the CUP be to specify that the drop-off zone Summit or not Marshall. I think we all agree we don't want to drop off on Marshall.
Is that something practical to do?
It's still interesting. It's a no parking zone.
So one thing that staff probably needs to confirm and verify, and we can do it even after if you did vote this evening and then moved it on to council. When it goes to council between then the time frame, we can verify with the police department whether they have any additional concerns, because I don't think there was further clarification. I think some of the concerns might not have been addressed by the police department in regards to people being dropped off at that particular intersection. So I think we need to clarify better that that is what would be occurring and verify whether the police department has any comment.
So that you could in there, you'd have like a 7 pending further comment by the police department.
Yes.
And is that west side of Summit there, is that a through lane that these cars would be stopping in?
yes, that is because of,
Are there 2 lanes on the west side or just 1?
it's the streets has the one side of parking on the east side and then just 2 lanes of traffic.
So the drop off would be taking up a lane of traffic.
Yes.
Yep.
That's a pretty wide lane. Cool.
It is a rather wide lane. I mean, it's similar to a lot of Webster streets where if you had parking on both sides, people are meandering along the area. So, it's not impossible for it to work. And again, depending on the drop off, there's a few ways, but we would probably want the police department to weigh in a different way on how this drop off would work.
Well, wouldn't you have people, or you would have cars lined up? You have to take a 2-year-old out of a car seat or a 3-year-old out of a car seat. So you're going to have parents getting out of their car, going around, taking kids out of the car, lining them up. I just have a big problem with that.
Yeah, I'd like this thing to work, but I just don't know that it's going to.
Yeah, I really want her to succeed. But this location is just rough. Yeah, because taking a kid out of a car, like Tony just said, I mean, if the kid's having a tantrum or a bad morning, like who knows how long that could take to get them out of the car. And then what the kid does, yeah. Believe me, I know.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great use. I just don't think this is the right location, just logistically, just on the drop-off part alone. Even if she could secure the 3 parking spaces in cold weather, in rain, trying to, if you have somebody that's coming to go to work and you've got people taking kids out of cars, you're going to get stuck at that intersection. It would be a mess, actually.
Yeah.
There are no good locations in Webster for daycare. There is no daycare in Webster, and people need it. The city's getting younger. People talk about affordable housing, but what's the point of affordable housing if you don't have affordable daycare? So I think the competing concern of having affordable daycare outweighs the idea of a perfect drop-off situation or a perfect traffic flow situation or a perfect parking situation. Like we've had this come up like 3 or 4 times now. And it's always like a debate, but we let them in and I haven't heard any complaints after we let them in.
Sorry, Scott, I didn't understand the very last thing you said.
No, just saying this issue with CUP issuance to daycare providers that are trying to, have a bigger audience of kids in their daycare situs. There's always an issue of parking and traffic, but there's no other good places to put these, these residential daycare facilities or even like business in a C zone facility. And so I just think that like having that kind of opportunity outweighs a problem with an imperfect parking or traffic flow issue. And we've allowed a few, I think 2 or 3 CUPs for this kind of situation before. And some neighbors spoke up at the hearings or whatever, but there haven't been any complaints since then that I know of. And I'm sure that the parents are happy to have affordable, daycare nearby in Webster where they live. So I just think that's like a meritorious reason to consider having a CUP issued, especially since it's a CUP and it could be, it doesn't run with the land. It just seems like it's a decent fit, especially in Marshall, in that area where there's a lot of families and a lot of kids that could use that resource. That's just my 2 cents.
That's fair point. I agree totally. I agree.
I also agree that the use is much needed. However, I think this is a safety issue. And if it only had a few, even a place to turn around would be acceptable, but there's just nothing here. I don't know. I just think there's a safety issue. It goes beyond a parking issue or all that kind of thing. It's a safety issue. So I would be interested to see what the police would have to say about people unloading kids in a street, in the middle of the street, basically.
Yeah. Scott, I mean, I agree. It's a meritorious use. I like the location personally, apart from the traffic and if we have to answer, to the factor of does this substantially increase traffic? I have to say it does.
Would you guys change your mind if, or would you change the sentiment if we added a condition about staggering the drop-off times so that it wasn't intense, so there was like some kind of safeguard of intensity that wasn't as dangerous or as like, rush hour centric or something like that?
Well, like to be like realistic, if you tell the parents to pick you up at 11:30, not all the parents are there at 11:30. The people get there at 11:25, people get there at 11:35. So I think it naturally staggers, but that's what and I don't know then who would be taking care of the other kids if someone was out there, like logistically.
But it sounded like, Annie, didn't she say that you can walk down the street? I mean, ideally you can drop right off in front of it, but
Yeah, that's what I want to know. Can you?
I mean, can't you also like walk there if you just want to park down the street farther, and just walk your kid down?
Yeah, that's what I would do. If I had a child going there, I would personally walk them up.
I mean, think about like who is most interested in their child's safety?
Right.
The parent dropping off. So
Totally.
like if they don't feel safe about the traffic conditions or the dropping off conditions, I would think that they just wouldn't do it and they'd find a solution, either go somewhere else or, park somewhere else and walk or whatever. So I just don't see that as being the limiting factor.
Okay. No, I know. I know people that go to play days and absolutely love it. So yeah, I want her to succeed. Yeah, why haven't we even asked if people can just park their car and just walk? Because that's what I would do.
Right. I mean, it's on them. It's like if you own a business and you want your clientele to come to you, ideally it's nice to have parking nearby, but if you can't do it, if you can't swing it, like we've done before, then that's on you.
Yeah, and that's an option for her, right?
Well, it seems like it is a problem for her business. And I don't know that we can, through the conditions on the use, come up with the solution for her. So it seems like we need to hear what the police have to say, if that's a safe solution. And then, I don't know, can those 3 spots that they are paying for, if they're reserved, maybe she can use that for a loading and unloading zone. And maybe that's more practical than stopping in the street. Because I agree, that seems like a traffic hazard to me. So I don't know then.
Our problem with the police thing is that we vote to approve this and then we, I don't know exactly what we've done then. We're voting to approve something that we're not really sure if we want to approve or not.
Well, we can hold it over and ask the city for more info or ask the applicant for more info.
Yeah. Would we be able to approve it depending on what the police, are we waiting for what the police would say? Haven't they already looked at this?
So 2 different things. There were 2 questions being asked. One question was, yes, you can hold it if you would like to. It would be another month, and then it would then be another at least minimum 2 weeks before it could go to city council, and then another reading. So that is one option. A second option is that, yes, you could, pending that there are no concerns with the police department, could move it forward with the current conditions to the city council. And that if there was something that the police department did want to put in as additional conditions, I think the problem is when we send these CUPs forward, most of them look at it as it's daycare. There's not a particular specific traffic concern that they are looking at necessarily when it's something with such small numbers. So there wasn't a more detailed staff request to look at this potential drop off that we were not completely understanding how they were going to drop off. So again, we could provide additional information to the police department. We could get that recommendation if you wanted to move it forward with should the police have no other additional conditions, these are the conditions that you would require. That's an option that you could take.
City council.
Correct. And just as a reminder, the CUP, we changed it recently that in a commercial district, you didn't need a CUP as long as you met the parking requirements. So there's a very specific reason we made the changes that I think Scott's been talking about to try to encourage more daycares to not have to go through the CUP process if they found a commercial location, if they had all the basics, to try to make this go smoother. It just so happened that this one came in and doesn't meet the basic requirements.
And that's because of the location.
That's because, yeah, the
It's because
parking's
of the
static.
location. Yeah, I will add, I understand the concerns about parking and nobody wants anybody to get hurt. But just for perhaps some perspective, you go down Marshall Avery's down there. And we're sitting here, 20 cars, 40 cars. There's a lot, but they're probably doing, Lord knows how many school buses out right off Marshall in that side street down there at Avery, 4 blocks away or something. So I'm just throwing that out as comparison.
I'm not familiar with what they do at Avery. I'm guessing they've got some kind of drop off area.
They do, but it's that same block right next to Marshall, almost the mirror image of what this would be.
They have a drop off in a no parking zone.
No, I don't know the street names and everything by heart, but it's
It's wide enough to
close.
park, it's wide enough to park on the Avery side and still get 2 lanes of traffic through. North of Marshall, there's parking on the west side. Right into that neighborhood.
So,
But I park there.
I mean, it's a much bigger operation. I should say kids are older, but
Dan, can you put up the 173 factors for me?
Oh, yes.
All right. Does anybody believe that this proposal will substantially increase traffic hazards or congestion?
Yes.
Yes.
I don't think it's going to substantially increase fire hazards. We agree to that.
Right.
Adversely affect the character of the neighborhood. Does anybody feel it will adversely affect the neighborhood?
No.
No.
Adversely affect the general welfare of the community.
No,
No.
Overtax public utilities.
no,
So we've got traffic hazards and congestion is the issue. And several people feel that that's a problem. And if that is a problem, then it can't pass, correct? If we had a majority that believed that it substantially increased traffic hazards or congestion, then it cannot pass. Is that right?
So we would still go to a vote after consideration of all of the elements, each of you in your discretion will make that decision. What you've done, and I appreciate what you've done in terms of trying to isolate the parts, it's still an overall projection that each individual member, commission member, would make a decision. It's your question, Charlie.
So we don't, we just make an overall decision.
Yes.
And one of us could say number 3 was our problem and another could say number 1 was.
Or you could simply say, considering these, I don't believe, or I believe that these things would be violated, would be effective.
but the motion could be where it's tricky, I guess.
I think, I mean, in my mind, the word substantially is the issue with the number 1 factor, substantially increased traffic hazard or congestion. And I would just like, ideally, I would move to hold it open and to let the applicant like amend to come back and satisfy this body that the drop-off situation won't substantially increase traffic hazards. I mean, I would make that motion.
How would the applicant do that? What would we be looking for?
Charlie, if I may, a little bit of a parliamentarian. Normally, you wouldn't engage in conversations about that until there's a second.
I'm sorry.
Until there's a second. So at that point, it's open for discussion.
So you think he's made a motion?
He said he did.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I didn't hear that part.
I'll second that.
I didn't hear him either. Did you make a motion? What was it?
Scott, did you make a motion? I thought I heard you say, did I make that motion?
Yeah, so I said I would make that motion that the applicant come back, hold the meeting over, have the applicant come back and satisfy the planning commission that the drop off won't substantially increase traffic hazards.
And so the motion would be to keep the public hearing open.
Right.
Pending the police input.
And there's been a second?
I'll second.
I'm sorry. Begin with my hearing. So I'll slow down a little bit.
All right.
What is the motion?
The motion is to keep the public hearing open to give the applicant an opportunity to further examine the drop-off issue. I think that's the police. And we do the police too, I think we do. Well, I for one am more comfortable doing that than passing this thing and passing it on to city council without having, I think, a complete review of it. That's my feeling.
So if there's no further discussion, we should put it to the vote.
All right.
Mara and Danny, I just have one more question if you're able to answer. How granular can we be on the condition of the parking? It's just that they have the spots it's just that they have the spots and we can choose the amount of spots?
So you would want to list the number of spots as a minimum requirement. They can always provide more. We would want to have something on file that they have those parking spaces secured. So that it's not just their word. But other than that, we don't normally require, if someone complains that they are not in compliance with the CUP, we would investigate. And the CUP requirements allow us to suspend the CUP should they not be in compliance with any of their specific requirements.
Mara, just theoretically, could they not have some kind of arrangement where they have, say, for example, a shuttle or a carpool arrangement, something like that, to satisfy the traffic and the parking?
Well, going back to the parking is supposed to be for the employees.
Oh, okay.
And it's keeping the employees from parking on those street spaces all, for the whole day. It's leaving spaces open that would allow for additional drop off for that really quick in and out movement. So I think the concern though is the idea that they're using Summit and a no parking lane for their particular queuing, because they do not have the ability to say that those spaces in front, which are open to all commercial users, are going to be dedicated for a drop off. So they're trying to use a dedicated drop off in an area because they know that people can't park there. So clarifying that and whether the police department has a concern on that would probably add some additional, information in order for you to make a better judgment and a better decision.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So we have a motion that's been moved and seconded to move this from executive session, put it back in the regular session, further public hearing at the next meeting. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Is there anyone opposed?
No,
Who said no?
Tony,
Is that a no vote?
it's a no to the motion to keep it open.
Okay. Should we do a roll call here?
Yes, please.
Michael, how did you vote?
Yes.
Maddie?
Yes, to continue.
Steve?
Yes.
Tony?
No,
Scott?
Yes.
Annie?
Yes, to continue.
Yes. Jeff?
Yes.
And the chair voted yes. So this is back on the docket for next meeting. All right. Is there a motion to move back into public hearing?
Could we take a quick break before we go on to the next part?
Pardon me?
I was wondering if we want to take a break.
We could take a break.
I could take a potty break for we.
Sure.
Can we move to take
Let's
a
take
break?
a 5-minute
All right,
break.
we'll take second.
I gotta rest.
For those that are listening, we're going to take a 5-minute break. We will be back momentarily and we will reopen with the public hearing for 21 PC 04 Douglas Hill.
Mara, I'm going to go ahead and sign off, okay?
Yes, Scott, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we ready? All right, so we are in executive session right now, and is there a motion to move back to public hearings?
So moved.
Is there anybody, or all in favor, signify by saying aye?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, we're back at public hearing. Can you read the next item on the agenda, please?
You make me do this again.
Yeah.
Here we go. 21 PC 04 Douglas Hill, an application by SG Collaborative LLC for a change of zoning from A4 7,500 square foot residence district, B1 multiple family district, E industrial district, and PC planned commercial district to PC planned commercial district on an approximately 15.1 acre tract of land located at the following addresses: 55 Lincoln Avenue, 62 Lincoln Avenue, 49 North Gore Avenue, 51 North Gore Avenue, 61 North Gore Avenue, 65 North Gore Avenue, 69 North Gore Avenue, 79 North Gore Avenue, 40 North Rock Hill Road, 200 Sherman Place, 201 Sherman Place, 203 Sherman Place, 205 Sherman Place, 207 Sherman Place, 200 West Kirkham Avenue, 204 West Kirkham Avenue, 234 West Kirkham Avenue, 240 West Kirkham Avenue, 242 West Kirkham Avenue, 320 West Kirkham Avenue, 340 West Kirkham Avenue, 107 West Pacific Avenue, 109 West Pacific Avenue, 111 West Pacific Avenue, 115 West Pacific Avenue, 125 West Pacific Avenue, 147 West Pacific Avenue, 207 West Pacific Avenue, 209 West Pacific Avenue, 211 West Pacific Avenue, 227 West Pacific Avenue, 315 West Pacific Avenue, 325 West Pacific Avenue, 341 West Pacific Avenue.
I understand you have a brief statement, is that correct?
Yeah, just very quickly, just as a reminder to everyone, on the June 7th public hearing, we went through a description of what our public hearing process was and how we were modifying it slightly based on the extent of the type of project that we had. It's a pretty large site for what we typically see in Webster Groves. And what we had done at the last meeting is we focused on going through what the process was, and then we went to the public hearing comments we'd received, because we'd received so many up to that point. And then we asked that the public hearing be kept open to the meeting that is this evening. So then we could go through the next sort of steps of the process. So for the next steps of the process, we're again doing something a little bit different than we normally would do. Most often, as you saw in the last CUP hearing, staff makes a presentation, and then it's followed by the applicant's presentation. Because in most cases, we are ready to make a formal recommendation. So that's why we usually start with our presentation. In this case, because we are moving our way through the process with quite a bit of information on quite a number of zoning topics, we are going to actually have the applicant make their presentation now. It's going to give you the opportunity to ask them specific questions. And then depending on how everything goes, we have the opportunity for staff to start with our analysis based on the staff report that we've provided. So we just wanted to kind of clarify that's how we had discussed this, as well as at the last meeting, the Plan Commission had made the determination that we are not taking public comment this evening. We have already included in your packet any comments that came between the last meeting and this meeting when we took the packets out. I know we've received a couple more emails. We will add them to your packet for the next month. And what we're going to do is hold all public comments to the next public meeting, which will be August 9th. So just making that clarification for those that are listening, that is the intent, is to hold off all public comment for everyone to review, hear all the information, and then can provide us the comments at that time. So if there aren't any other questions about the process, we'll move over to the applicant's presentation.
Just before we do that, Scott Miller has recused himself and he's no longer present.
That is correct. Scott has recused himself and is no longer present. He was available for the first half of the meeting. We now have 7 members in attendance at this time.
Did we cover all the comments that were submitted prior to the last meeting?
So up until 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock, the day of the meeting, the June meeting, we read all of those into the record. The only ones that have not yet been read into the record are the small grouping that were in your packets. We will make sure that those are read at the next meeting. And then I believe I think there's one that came in via email today that will be added to your packet for next month. Any other questions?
You intend to go through the full staff analysis this evening?
We're gonna see
So
how,
what's-
we're gonna see how the presentation goes. We're gonna see all the questions that you have. Staff is prepared to go through our analysis. But let's see where we go. Let's see how you all are feeling, and then we can,
So it'll be our discretion.
it'll be your
Okay.
discretion. Staff is prepared and has their full PowerPoint ready to do the full presentation. We had not anticipated that our CUP, we hadn't anticipated having a CUP this evening. We also hadn't anticipated it going as long as it did. We probably would have made your meeting start even earlier to work that in, but we'll work with what we've got right now.
All right. So who is here on behalf of 21 PC0?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Larry Chapman. I'm the S for Seneca and SG Collaborative. This is my partner, Phil Halls, whose company is Green Street. That's the G in the SC Collaborative that made the presentation to you earlier. We have some of our other members, Liz Austin and Joel Oliver. They're both Webster residents, as am I. Amanda Hours, my development vice president, and then we have Carrie Falkenrath with T-Squared, our traffic consultant, and George Stock, our civil engineer. Anticipating you might have some technical questions that are here. If you have more questions, we have a much deeper bench team, but we didn't want to load you up all night. We wanted to kind of get through what we have as a good amount of information. So what I wanted to kind of chat with you about tonight is, number one, on the way getting here, I don't know that all of you remember, initially, we were invited to make a response to proposals from the city to look at developing this area, which we did over a year ago. And in fact, we're selected in February of 2020. Since that time, we had 3 meetings that were designed to gather information and then present an initial plan. Those go back to April 23rd, 2020. These were virtual, but very well attended. Most often, hundreds of people were on the virtual event. And then again on July 14th of 2020. From those 2 meetings and information gathering sessions, we called them town halls at the time, we rolled out in September 24th of 2020 our idea of a plan, which looks substantially similar to what we're going to show you tonight. And that was really about gathering information and making sure what we did had some resemblance to what we were hearing were important with the city's residents. The other thing that happened is we then melded in the things that we knew we would need to do to make it a successful development. And so now we've gotten to the point where we're going through a formalized zoning. We'll be going through many other approvals with city council, everything from some tax incentives to get the job done to future architectural review boards. There's a ton of process still to go. And we appreciate that you're all here. Staff did an amazing job in June. It was a long, arduous meeting. I'm glad you all sat through it. Wish you didn't have to, but I'm happy that you did. The other thing I'd like to say tonight, because I think it's important, is that there's a very definitive misinformation campaign going on out there. And so we'd like to be the resource of information. We have a very nice website that has all that information. We're trying to dispel what we're hearing as rumors and things that we are being told or being said about the project that aren't true. And so we would hope that you would direct your inquiries to us. And if you have a serious concern or question, we would like to answer that, because our point is we want to make sure that what we do is in line with what you all want to see. You're charged with the planning responsibility for this community. And so we want to do a good job for you as well. I will tell you that there are some things that we've been talking about. And for us, and Phil will talk about some things here in a minute, is it's about the experience economy. In the world today, people want to see living options. I've been living in Webster for 30 years. We're empty nesters now. My wife wants to keep the house, but at some point, we'd like an option to stay here in a place that's got modern amenities and things like that, but doesn't have the yard and the 100-year-old house. And there really aren't any options in Webster right now. And so we think that's a choice. The other choice that we are looking for is to bring a place for people moving into the community, or people who are employed here can afford to live in some way, shape, or form. And we've got to focus on workforce housing. We'll talk about a little bit later on as well. There's also some huge and great history telling going on here. I'm going to point up to the site plan up there. And we'll start to talk about a little more and more as we go. But what we're talking about is, this is Rock Hill, this is the railroad tracks, this is Gore, this is Kirkham. And basically, if you walk that site, everything in between is mostly older industrial buildings and buildings that are getting, a little bit dated. They don't provide a huge amount of economic impact. And they aren't really contributing to the city all that well. It's also an area that doesn't encroach directly into adjacent neighborhoods. Sure, it sits around them, but it's an opportunity to do something really special, we believe, without hurting really important parts of the community. It's also next to Old Webster, and we believe that if this goes forward, this will become a catalyst to encourage more development in Old Webster that will continue to help make Webster a robust community, both economically and people-wise. We're going to talk a little bit about the gathering space. This is Old Community Baptist Church, which will stay. This is an older historic building that's on the historic register. But other than that, we're looking at revamping the entire area here. Shady Creek runs through here. For those of you who haven't been down in it, I would encourage you to do that. And as we now have been evolving our plans, we're going to create a little natural pond area here that will keep water year round, whereas the creek really doesn't. It's only a drainage ditch. And it is really an opportunity to do something quite special. We'll talk a lot over the next few days and meetings, I suspect, about density and things of that nature. The density is incredibly critical to the success of this development, both making it economically feasible, and it's the kind of thing we need to allow the businesses to thrive. So that's what we have here. We've got ample parking on the streets. You don't see parking lots for these garages. All of the parking for the buildings are contained under the buildings in garages. All of the garages interconnect underground, and all the garages will be able to make their way to this little access point here so they can get out onto Kirkham if they want to without getting onto Rock Hill or Gore. And we'll have our traffic engineer talk about that if you like. And she's also able to talk about the impacts that we found. We think it's important to have an area where this is a natural amphitheater, and I'm going to have Phil talk about the gathering space a little bit. And all of the work in the creek will be done in concert with, we have 3 jurisdictional bodies: the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, which is going to be the toughest one, an individual 404 permit; MSD, which has a lot to say about stormwater management, because today there's absolutely no stormwater management anywhere on the site; and then Webster Groves, which has a lot to say about its own community in the creeks as well. Ultimately, our plan calls to rebuild the culvert that goes under Gore because it's inadequate in size. And at the end of the day, we would expect to file a letter of map revision with FEMA that will actually lower the floodplain elevations in this area by about 1 foot. And George can talk about that if you like. But if you go on to the next slide, I think one of the most critical things to talk about is the gathering space, we call it. And here is the area that sits up around the sculpture garden here, which will remain unchanged unless we work something out with the Arts Commission. But it's a great opportunity to do some fun things. Phil?
So a couple of things that I think are important just as a little backdrop here. I spent a lot of time in the city of St. Louis creating stronger communities and attracting young professionals and creating diverse, inclusive places to live and work. And this is really a unique opportunity to do all of that here. We've got a big enough scale to really put this all together and have it interact. And part of that is creating a walkable, connected community that has spaces where you can have concerts, music. You have Jazz Fest here in Webster, which is a wonderful opportunity to bring that here to the community that share it, not just to the people who live here, but to the greater community, and also attract people outside. It's also a great place for farmers market, art shows, or art weekends where you, like in Clayton, that's probably one of the most successful, or the one that Schlafly has in Maplewood. Those are the kind of things that create community engagement and kind of that diversity of experience. And it also attracts people to the neighborhood who want to live here. And one of the challenges is having these connected pieces here that create that experience. And this river walk is another example of how you create these connections to the people that live in your community. and to interact with each other and create a sense of community and really involvement in your community. And I think a little bit of what you have that certainly in Old Webster. One of our goals is to connect this whole development across the tracks back into Old Webster so that there is this connectable, walkable community. We also want to be able to have people just gather here on a natural walking trails to interact and be a part of the community. And there's so many other opportunities to bring people together, which this living experience will do with pools, clubhouses, bike trails. Just that richness allows people to really want to live and work here. And I think one of the challenges is having the young people gather here and the older community stay here as they outgrow their homes.
Would you go on to the next thing? I think one of the things we talk about, I think about not only the park, but the entire streetscape. We focused on the streets along here, but we want there to be public art that is interactive and experiential. One of the things we're doing is working with a company based out of Canada that does these musical swings. You can Google musical swings Montreal, you'll get to see them. There's a picture of it in the lower left-hand corner. But one of my goals is to make sure that this park area is used 365, 24/7. There's always an opportunity for it to be safe, family friendly, and a place to go. We've heard the question over and over again, where can people just hang out and do things? We believe this is one of those places. The entire streetscape should be the same thing. And we'll work with this company to come up with something that's custom for Webster and this development. And we believe will attract people from outside the community in. We love it when people come from outside Webster to spend their money here and then go back home on our businesses. We think that's great. Would you go to the next thing? So here's some precedent images that are similar. You know, I'm a big believer in having nice seating areas in the amphitheater setting. You'll notice there's some terraces there. The picture in the upper right-hand corner is kind of what we envision, concrete and grass areas to sit. We have a stage that'll move in and out that's portable. We have places for other fun things such as a splash park, which is what you see in the lower left-hand corner, an example of a farmer's market. And then we even have an area where we can park food trucks. I learned how to do that at 9 Mile Garden. We've gotten pretty good at it. And we can do that here when we have events. I think, I'm not ready to go ahead. I think as we go on down the line, we've been asked a lot of questions. And although we aren't ready to tell you exactly this is what we're going to build and design, we've said over and over again, we're going to build an infrastructure. And we're going to take that infrastructure. And if you think about Webster, when it was originally developed, somebody came in and put in roads and utilities, and then buildings cropped up. And they were individually designed and individually identified. And we think we have that opportunity to do that here, which is why instead of doing 1 or 2 big buildings, we have 8 buildings plus some townhomes and things like that. And so as we look at this next slide, we're starting to give you an idea of what we think the park will look like. So here it's hard to see. This is the view looking west from Gore. So on the left-hand side, that's where we expect and hope we'll get the office building that we show on there. On the right, you'll see a condominium building that we expect to put here. But I think what's really important to focus on is the street life and the streetscape, because that is really what we're trying to work on. We have areas we can put public art. We also have areas up and down that street where you can literally have outdoor seating for restaurants and other retail environments that are almost as big as the retail store is inside. And as much as we have great things going on Lockwood now, we don't have enough room to have those environments without the dogs walking through the dinner place, walking through the other things. And so that's really a huge focus here. It's not on the road, but we need the road. It's really not on the parking, but we need the parking, which you'll see the angle backup parking. The other thing we're going to talk about later on as we go through it, I don't know if you can see these things here. Those are what we're calling history frames, and those are those things there. We're going to have a lot of discussion about history telling. What we can do is permanent landmarks here. You know, we look at this development and we called it Douglas Hill after a lot of discussion and investigation, but that's not really what it's going to be known as. Douglas Hill is going to be the overriding idea here. There'll be a new street here to be named. There'll be a new Riverwalk to be named. There'll be a new park here to be named. There'll be lots of naming things going on, and that's the names you're going to remember. And we're going to do that interactively with the community, because When you say, go meet me at Douglas Hill, that's not gonna matter. When you say, meet me at this park or that park, that's what's gonna matter. Those are gonna be the names we remember. And we'll focus those on more specific things related to the history of the community. If you flip the thing over. Here's the look going the other way from, looking east from Rock Hill. And you'll see we dip down a little bit. I think one of the things that's really important for people to understand is the buildings seem high, but in order to build them, we have to dig down and then come back up again. We're not setting them up on the highest point and going up from there. We're actually coming down and going back up. The highest point in this area right now is the roof of the office building at 20 Allen. We won't have anything that's any taller than that. Most everything will be shorter than that. And I think it's really important to understand that we're fighting the grades. There's 60 feet of fall on the railroad tracks down to Kirkham. And we're getting these extended floor elevations only because we're fighting the grades. If you really think about it, and you look at the staff report, they did a great job. It's really 5 up and 2 down. It's not 7 up. And so we have a choice. We could build a building that sits 5 stories up and do nothing down here. It doesn't change the height of the building at all, but we can take advantage of the drop off on the hill and make it more economically sound. It's also what helps us afford to do some workforce housing, which we're going to talk about more of. And it's also something that allows us to get the number of people we need here to support and sustain these businesses. Now, we've been reading, and maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. I'll come back to the walkability in a minute. I think we want to run through some of this a little bit more if you don't mind. And so that's really an idea of architecturally. Each building will be entirely different in design and all designed for the pedestrian experience. One of the things we learned is when you have a walkable neighborhood, you only effectively get people who walk about 1.3 miles that'll sustain the businesses. Once you get beyond that distance, the walking tapers off and you go back to automobile traffic. Well, if you want to have enough people to sustain the businesses in Webster, they need to be mostly within that 1.3 mile radius. We don't have anywhere near enough people in that area to keep these businesses strong and healthy. We also need to improve our parking so that people coming from outside of Webster have a place to park. We've got 140 surface parking spaces. Not a single one of them is going to be needed to put people in our buildings. It's all for public parking. And it will be on the new primary street to this development. And it's also, we're taking what's specific now, turning it into a one-way access road. So you come in from Rock Hill, you leave on Gore. We don't have people trying to go left and right onto Rock Hill Road at the railroad tracks. It's very dangerous. And I've seen a lot of close calls there because I live right up the street a block away. I think those things will all help the neighborhood.
So also I want to mention all this outdoor space is much enlarged from what you see in Old Webster. And we recently did the Olive and Oaks new facility, and it really showed us the character and quality that you can create in a community that can use that street experience to really draw people in. And COVID came by and really changed everybody's business. And I think what we're trying to do is really create this outdoor engaged environment that will have kind of these destination entertainment venues that complement what's in Webster but not take away, and to bring that greater density that helps all these businesses thrive, because density is part of the equation to success in a community, and it's got to be vibrant and changing and raising the bar constantly in terms of how you approach young people.
And so when we look at what the street experience is like, this is some what we call precedent examples of things that we would like to replicate. So over the right, given it's a river and a river walk in San Antonio, it's a good example of 7-story facades right on the Riverwalk that you would never notice or even there if you're on the Riverwalk. You're too busy enjoying the scenery that you're in. Places for tables and chairs, places for bicycles. That's our focus here. There's a great example in the lower right-hand corner of a street art fair that's going on the main street, which could easily happen on this road. It doesn't have to be used for traffic all the time. And so it's about the experience is what we can tell you. That's really, really important for us to focus on that. The other thing, if you'd switch this over one more time, that we want to talk about in slide form is history telling. We've been spending a lot of time with some folks, the leader of which right now is Melissa Sanders. We've been going through the history of this area. We believe we can use through what we call history frames and other structures, things that will engage you physically in learning about what's going on here. The old area called Vinegar Hill is a great example, and we're gonna tell good stories about that. There's an old dump, right, where those red dots are that we didn't know about, that has some historic connotations that go back to just the post-Civil War days and the early 1900s. So we think storytelling and history telling is a great opportunity here. In the upper scene, we saw an environment where they built a structure, they carved the words into the roof, and when the sun hits it right, you can read the words on the ground. It's just sort of a fun, you know, tactile experience you can use in an environment like this. I think that, and you can leave this slide up. We don't have any more slides. We want to get to where you can all ask questions and not spend all your time showing pictures, which we could do forever and never get through everything. I think in addition, you should hear a little bit about the workforce housing component, because that's really important. You know, we've stayed away from words like affordable that get associated with LIHTC, low income housing tax credits and things like that for a reason. We set a standard for affordable, someone making about $42,000 a year. Where did that come from? That's what a new school teacher makes in the school district. We'd like someone like that, or a new employee working here, or a police officer, or someone coming to Webster, even an employee of the Webster Groves City Hall, have a place to live here and work here. And so we picked that number, but we don't want it to be, that's the affordable building over there, and this is everybody else's building over here. We want it to be ubiquitous. We want all those people living together, and but for a process by which they're selected, no one would know who's getting the affordable unit and not. It's the exact same environment for everybody. I also think that we are going to provide amenities, and Phil, you need to tell people how important the amenities are to keeping people and making these apartments.
So we've done a concentrated effort down near WashU, BJC, WashU Research Center, at Cortex, St. Louis U. And what we've done over the last 3 or 4 years is attracted really a lot of the resident doctors. 51% of our tenants that are in our complexes are resident doctors, or they're from Cortex, the professional tech firms that are there. They're from MasterCard, Boeing. So you got a very diverse, well-heeled community, very well-educated. And what they're looking for is that experiential lifestyle that they can expand what would normally be in a big house and an outdoor. They have it in terms of an environment that they can walk through the entrance into a courtyard that has a beautiful, almost resort pool. It has outdoor dining. We have really a lot of attention to bikers, because people young like to get out on a bike rather than just get in a car, and like myself. Also, we have dog parks. We have just movie theaters that are built in where you can rent them out for the evening, your group, or Super Bowl, whatever the event is. And I think what you really experience is that you create this larger community that loves having this experience, but also we mix it with restaurants, entertainment. So it's a life that really engages you with people around you and the experience. It's all walkable right out the front door. So this is what we want to create here. It's an opportunity to have condominiums, townhomes, multifamily, community spaces, and a rich array of amenities that kind of bring it all together.
And I would suggest to you that there's a lot of technical questions you're going to have. I'm going to touch briefly on stormwater and traffic, and then we're going to get to the Q&A, because I want you all to have the chance to ask your questions. We could do this endlessly, and I wouldn't want to do that all night long. But on the stormwater side, I think I told you we were going to request a map revision from FEMA. I think the most important thing for you to understand, and I'm sure George can answer your technical questions, is it going to be better? Is it going to be worse? And right now today, there's 0 stormwater management improvements on this entire site. 0, none, nada, nothing. Everything goes right from the Mother Nature right into Shady Creek. We'll have to detain and provide water quality for all of that, like we were a brand new virgin development, and we will do that. It'll be done under the street in specialized systems, because it's the most efficient way to do it, but we will do that. Our traffic study has also been submitted. I know it's been reviewed. I know there's some comments that have been asked, and they're going to work it out. Terry Falkenrath from T-Squared is here, and She's a Webster resident as well, and she's done the best she can to determine what the impacts are. And I think other than Rock Hill, the impacts are not significant, but Rock Hill is already not doing that great. And we don't think you'll feel the difference that much, but we're here to talk about that as well. I think that for us, and for me, Phil and I are long-term investors. We're not doing this to build it and sell and get out. We discussed this at length when I was trying to determine who I should partner with. When I submitted our response to the city's request for proposals, I reached out to Phil because he is a long-term holder of real estate. We would expect to be the owners and operators of this project for years and years and years to come, and maybe even our kids and grandkids after that. But we're not here to come in and come out. And so I think that's important to say out loud. And we're here to answer your questions, and hopefully you have some, and we'll do our best to answer them in an effective and efficient way.
I had some questions. If I heard you right, you'd ask for questions.
That's where we are. I don't run
But I know you didn't touch on it, so I'd like to speak to your traffic engineer to start with. So, Huddy, thanks. I'm sorry, your study here, if I'm following right, and it's in the application, you show AM of 443 new trips and PM of 636 new trips is what generated from the development on page 4.
Yes.
If I move to table 2, I'm showing 317 AM trips and 488 PM trips. So I was wondering if you could explain that difference and what's actually used in the, I believe you call the proposed model.
Hey, Michael, will you tell us page numbers you,
Pardon me?
will you tell us the page numbers of?
Page 4, I think, was the
Page-
executive summary.
The executive summary on page
And it
4.
says the 443 and page 19 is table 2.
Yes,
Table 2 has, based on the ITE
yes,
trip development, I believe, version 10,
yes.
which seems right. So I was just wondering what difference was and what's actually used in the model. And I didn't see anywhere in the report what models actually use, what capacity.
It should be noted in there, we use Synchro. I'll answer that question first, and I'll see if I can find the reference. And I'll apologize, it looks like the executive summary did not get updated when the table itself got updated. So as you know, the numbers kind of fluctuate during the planning of a development. And so I'm trying to keep up with that, constantly revising the analysis. So the table 2 is correct. That's the
Table 2 is
most
correct.
recent,
That's what's
yes.
in the model, because
On
those
page
are a
19.
little bit less than,
It is less because things changed a little bit. So
so
during,
they got to give you more time and more money.
I'm sorry?
They need to give you more time and more money, right?
Yes.
Okay, so table 2, you're telling me is correct, but that is less.
It is. And that was because of some of the assumptions we made early on as far as what was going to be in that mixed use component and how large that was going to be.
I noticed labeled draft and not sealed, I assume. Will that be required as part of the planning and zoning exercise? Will it not to be finalized and sealed, not till it goes to the city?
So what we usually do is during the rezoning, that is to help make some determinations on how we're going to move forward. When it comes to the first final development plan before you, that is when they have to provide everything that we put in the recommendations in your ordinance. So you're going to create an ordinance that's going to require a certain element of regulations. And then when they come back before the planning commission with their final development plan, because they don't have to update it as you keep talking about what you want to do, that would be when we would require, potentially, you could require that you want a full final traffic study.
So okay, so so some inconsistencies there that need to be corrected, if I'm hearing you.
Right.
Okay, so that study in your figures in there, and reading through the study, I only see a brief mention of the railroad. But if I'm following this right, the railroad come through there somewhere about here.
Yes.
I think the railroad has a great impact on traffic. I realize maybe that's not a standard analysis tool in that software, but I simply can't believe that a traffic engineer as talented as too couldn't figure out how to include that and model it. And I would submit that's important to really understand what's happening to the traffic. And at least start with the question, how many trains are there? How often do they come?
So
Are they consistent? Do they come during peak hour?
that is a question that I asked, and we can't get an answer to that from the railroads. They don't give you an answer to that. It is industry standard that we don't typically include something, a railroad that is a sporadic use, which I know sporadic here. Some people see it sporadic as not, but considering the railroad doesn't have regular timetables, then we would consider it a sporadic use and it wouldn't get factored in. I do want to say that it is taken into consideration from the standpoint that, you know, when there is a train, we know there is a queue. We also know that 4 blocks to the east, there is Elm, which has access capacity at this point in that segment between Lockwood and Kirkham. And that I don't know why residents don't use it more. I do, I certainly do. But if you know you're crunched for time, you can always use Elm. You know it has an underpass, you know you won't get stopped for traffic. So we kind of take that into consideration as well. But as far as being able to include the randomized trains within our analysis, that is not something industry standard in this particular situation.
It's about 48 of them a day.
And then there's no regular timetable. So when we do our analysis also, I'll point out, we really focus on the peak periods, which is AM and PM commuter times. So to be able to factor in the train impacts, you'd have to know how many trains are crossing during those peak periods and when, and that's information we just can't get a hold of.
I mean, you do your traffic counts based on, well, collecting traffic data.
Yes.
If we can't get data from the railroad, and you know, you preach it, working with the railroads.
I know.
Worse than working with the Corps.
Much worse.
Is it worth standing out there with your clicker? Because you're saying it's not normally included. You know, I was out there 7 o'clock. And I don't want to make this personal.
No.
I was out there 7 a.m. Sunday, and there were 6 cars lined up waiting to go through the train.
Right.
And I can't believe that if you start queuing up, you may impact some of your VC ratio and your times at those lights and really push it off the level of service.
You would significantly impact operations during a train. But once again, there are alternatives to those queues. If there's a 4-link or 4-car, 6-car queue, 2 blocks to the east, you can use Elm, you can use the underpass. I know
I'm not
it's currently,
buying it.
no, I realize.
I'm
it's
not bad,
currently
but I
a
think at least your study ought to say that
concern.
at least.
Let me ask you a question. I mean, if average train these days is 8,000, I don't know how fast it goes through, we could probably get that information. On average, I think it's 35 mile an hour trains.
Yeah,
If we had a train time that could tell you how much more things we could up, would that help you? I think we could probably come up with analysis and set an average train takes this many minutes to go by and that much time it would fill this much traffic. I can tell you, I live right there, by Elm and Scene. Everybody squeezes down Elm and Scene and cuts around going over to Elm every time the train queues up, because I live it every day as well. This development's on the other side of the track, so in morning rush hour, I don't think would have any impact at all. I guess potentially at evening rush hour. If you think you could do a little analysis like that and share it, what would happen if you lost 2.5 minutes?
Yeah, I mean,
That's not the best.
I'm hesitant to say do this or do that. From a little bit I understand T2, I mean, you guys know what you're doing. So I think you can figure it out.
The train there, the train going through there takes about 8 to 12 minutes. Sometimes.
Right, and I guess where my concern is, you're based on level of service and delays at lights in town is the way level of service is generally driven, as I understand it. So you know, if you're right on a bubble here, then right now that train is blacking people up so long. If you add 317 AM cars, does it suddenly go from my level of services, a B or a C to an F? And we're into warrants for doing things like license stuff. Is that a break even point? And the model is meant to be mathematical description of what happens and tell us that. So for that model to be accurate, it needs to include all the variables.
But all the cars aren't gonna go up Rock Hill over the railroad tracks or up or over the railroad tracks.
It could do this or that, but for the model to be accurate, it needs incorporate.
I think it's important to look at the plan because we are following as much traffic on the Kirkwood.
Right.
And we are following as much traffic on the core because it still has a good amount of capacity.
Unless the train,
Unless you're train and you're going, correct. If you're going north or east-west, you're right out of it. Because we've got Kirkham and Brentwood going the other way. So it's only southbound movements that would affect how this will affect it. I also believe whether you believe this or not, I have to develop a lot of office buildings as well. We're seeing a paradigm shift in how and when people work. It's crazy what's going on. I talk to employers every day and all their employees want to work from home. The answer is no, but what they can give them is flexible time and when they come in, and most of them will elect to come in during non-rush hours. So I think we're going to see and witness a very different pattern of traffic in the not too distant future.
Well,
I just believe in that.
and I'm not. Right. I'm not traffic engineer, but you've got two models, your existing, your proposed.
Yes.
Maybe there needs to be 4, even 6 miles, an existing with the railroad, or proposed with the railroad, and see.
Well, I do want to clarify that it's not, the models do not factor in railroads. This
I'm
just synchro model does not factor in railroads. It is a node-based model. So you're looking at intersections.
Right.
Right. So when
It's
you
getting
say
intersections,
models,
but again, I mean, maybe there's workarounds as putting the railroad in as an intersection that's all red for 8 minutes or whatever.
Right.
So doing your
I think
analysis.
what I'm hearing you say, and not put words in your mouth, is you want something that looks and feels like what I experience in real life. And let's see if we can't come up with something that tells you what that experience is in real life and share it with you.
That's the model's a mathematical representation of real life. So
I
we
get it.
should.
I think it can be something. that
I'm sorry.
Everybody.
So 2, you talk about you're adding warrants and add signals at 2 intersections, I believe. You suggested that.
I talked about, so existing traffic conditions at Rock Hill and Kirkham and Rock Hill and Lockwood do meet signal warrants based on the volumes that we used, currently meet warrants for a signal. So that's what I discussed in the report, is that they currently meet warrants.
So both new signals suggested would be on Rock Hill.
Yes.
So they're going to be kind of close.
Well, and I wasn't necessarily
Joe.
suggesting them. I was using that as a point of reference, that that would be the city's determination, but they are currently warranted.
So again, I said maybe 6 models. I almost wonder if we should model with the lights there to see if they need to be synchronized or something. Or time, so the city don't have to pay the $10,000 down the road to actually figure that out.
Oh, that's part of the, I guess, consideration, yes.
Right, so I would suggest a 3rd scenario. You're just imposed and then proposed with signals. I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
Go ahead. You got more? Go ahead.
Traffic is gonna be one of the biggest things that's gonna be around.
It always is.
It was just a little thing, because, yeah, some of them, I believe it was at the Rock Hill, you stayed level of service F, but you did have a delay go from 82 seconds to 138 seconds. So that's pretty significant increase in delay. And I believe that was one of them where you wanted to light. So I'd be curious what impact the light has on that delay. And I think that's for the city to know if it's warranted. We need that answered. To know what effect that light would have.
Where is this likely located?
So this is the reason I shied away from kind of including that in our plan is that the two intersections would be Rock Hill and Kirkham and Rock Hill and Lockwood. And so currently today, they potentially warrant signals. The city hasn't installed them, probably for a reason. So I think we would want to take a step back and coordinate with the city on why there are not signals there and how moving forward that would be addressed. So, and I want to also mention, and the staff did a good job of noting this, we had to collect traffic volumes because we wanted to move traffic forward and be able to answer questions. We collected traffic volumes during COVID, and we applied a growth factor using some some historic data that we were able to obtain from the city. And we used about a 30% growth factor, which is fairly conservative, I'm sure. We also, I should back up. So all of our existing analysis and future analysis is based on that kind of assumption of where traffic currently is. So when I say we currently have an F, signals are currently warranted at Rock Hill and Kirkham and Rock Hill and Lockwood, that's using that kind of adjusted current volume situation.
And one of staff's recommendations, I guess, is to put more meat behind that 30%.
Right.
And I did chuckle. The 30% is conservative, but I know in your report, you said you've showed 0 to 40%. So I might say 40% is the most conservative.
Well, and then St. Louis County is saying they're seeing more like 20.
But
So
yeah, I think staff's recommendation, I would support that they maybe more meat. But from what I've seen and people I talked to, those through numbers at Kirkham seem pretty good. The 400 or so through that intersection. And just a little thing on, I guess the same table on that Rock Hill and Oak Street, table 6.
yes,
I don't, your
page 27.
BC ratio goes down from existing to the build. I don't know if that's correct. Seems like
I
it
don't
took
have
a-
BC ratio shown. Are you talking about the LOS, the level of service?
On table 6 here, North Rock Hill. So from here to there, the delay time goes up, but the VC goes down. Is that possible?
I'm sorry, I'm not following
I can
where our
show you if
VC
you want.
goes. Okay.
So that goes up. This number goes down.
I'm sorry, okay, I thought you were looking at the row above it. So interestingly, volume to capacity ratio, and what he's talking about is the capacity of an intersection and how much traffic is using it. And when you're looking at an intersection that is controlled in any way, stop signs, signals, the balance of traffic makes an impact on your volume to capacity ratio. So you might have more traffic, but it's spread out kind of at more legs, more of the approaches. And then that would show your volume to capacity actually going down a little bit because it's more balanced in volumes. So it's just a function of the math.
So that is a possibility.
So yeah, it is. That is, and that's always something that I kind of keep an eye out for because when general public is reviewing a traffic study and they see something like that, it's a instant question.
So I think if I can maybe just summarize what I was getting at as the comment that I do think it should. However, this gentleman put it, reflect what's actually happened in real life, including the train. Perhaps a condition including the light signals installed. And it does sound like maybe you might need to proof it. I don't know if we necessarily want it sealed and finished before I guess I'll leave that to you, to how you normally do it. But I think we want to get something, before I would be willing to vote.
Right.
That's a little more.
Just for the record, I like to leave a draft through the staff review because I don't like people to think that we're giving you the answer and that you have no input on the process.
Understand.
How does that light perform when there's a train?
Oh, if there was a signal at that intersection, there's different ways to do that, but what they usually would do is put in, I just lost the word, just similar to how you would have a transponder when you have a fire truck to be able to proceed through an intersection and have priority. They would have you would have a camera or a sensor set up that would be connected to that intersection, and it would change the signals to reflect the fact, say, if you were northbound on Rock Hill, it would be red for the duration of the train. So.
Big Bend, just west of Lindbergh, they have that. Train has their thing, but they also have traffic lights.
Preemption, that's the word I'm looking for, signal preemption. So they're tied together. There's a sensor.
Anything else, Michael?
Not on that. Other
Not on
questions.
traffic.
Lots of questions.
Lots of questions.
Well, Jeff, how about you?
All right, thanks, Mike, for your diligence in the traffic. I don't have any traffic tonight. I probably will in the future. I apologize. I've not had a chance to go through it in detail this go round. I do have some other just general questions for everyone. The gathering area, how many acres is that?
All in, it's just a little under 3 when you take in the area that can be accommodated.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Jeff, what was your question?
The acreage of the gathering area. I'm sorry. The acreage of the gathering area. Size.
Such as under.
And I think you touched on this, but what comments from the public would you say you have incorporated into the current plan through the town hall process?
Well, we if you go back to the very, very beginning, we heard about diversity and sustainability and making connections to all of the Webster Groves community, which we think we're addressing with how we're doing the street and the experience there, which we would do anyway. We heard a lot of comments about Shady Creek and preserving it the way it is really isn't in a preservable form. And so we focused on how can we make it better and improvement and something that people would actually want to live around and learn and experience. I would tell you that people worried about parking, people worried about affordable housing and where they could live and work and play. I think all those are things that we've done a reasonably good job of addressing. The only thing we really couldn't do a huge amount of work on was the height and the ultimate density, which is critical for the feasibility of the development. But I think we've listened, and I think we've developed a plan that if we went back through all of those different town halls, which I'd be happy to do, and send you over the list. We actually, in some of the meetings, we said, here's what you said, here's what we did, here's what you said, here's what we did. Can I remember all those? No, but I can be happy to go through them all with you, Jeff.
6,000 square foot for restaurants. Is that correct from what I read? 6,000 square foot dedicated to restaurants.
Well, I don't know that anything is dedicated to restaurants. We've got about 60,000 square feet of space on the first floor that could be anything. We aren't saying one thing will be a restaurant, one thing will be retail. We've said the first floor will be focused on commercial and retail. I'm not sure I know what you're reading exactly.
The application actually does say 6,000 square foot for restaurant uses. It was identified because we did ask for identification because the restaurant uses use more parking. So the mix has flexibility, but that was the initial number, has a 6,000.
Yeah, I apologize, I don't recall. The
And did
number.
you-
The discussion I remember having with my team is, can we meet the parking requirements, which was a big discussion. And we kept saying, well, if you do this number, it's that parking. If you do this number, it's that parking. What we said is, we're going to make the parking code work. Whatever we have to do to make the parking code work, we're going to do. We're going to dedicate the first floors of our buildings to commercial and retail space because that's what we think we need to do. That's how we think we're going to be successful. We're going to create a pedestrian overpass to get people to and from that from the old Webster area so it can happen when trains are coming. We're going to create plenty of outdoor parking so we can not only support our side in Webster, but we're focused on the commercial space in a big way. And we're focused on it as long as we can make it successful. If we can't make it successful, we'll revert to the kind of things we have now. But yeah, we are not intending in any way to limit restaurant space. I think Alvin Oak alone is how many square feet? 26,000 square feet on its own.
And that's a large space, but.
Yeah, it's an
certainly,
unusual
but-
space, but if you had event space, you would do that. The first floor of that office building is about 45,000 square feet by itself. If it wanted to be, if we had a customer, we would make it all.
So I mean, my concern, my overarching concern about the planned commercial is vague plans to go in with lots of options, and then in the end, we get, 100,000 square foot of residential and two restaurants, right?
Yes.
So that's why I kind of focused on
And-
that, and that would
and-
be my
and-
concern
and-
going
And that's a
forward.
fair question, but I have to ask you to put yourself in my shoes. Just the investment in the land and infrastructure is somewhere in the neighborhood of $55 to $60 million. If that was all of my intent, we would be crazy loons to even start. And so we really believe we're going to create all of this, and we're focused on it entirely. It's the only way we will be successful. So if I could tell you what every single building was going to be on a project that's going to take 5 to 7 years to implement, I would do it. But the market's going to go through 3 or 4 ups and downs. What I can tell you is I've been doing this for 42 years. And you stay focused on the objective, which is to create a great experience, great living options in Webster Groves, and bring some additional commercial in here that will be successful, and you'll see a great job happen. Every time we go to the architectural review board, you get another bite at the apple. You'll get to see everything we're doing while we're doing it. But I still, to this day, am not able to 100% predict the future on a big land development, which is what this is.
Sorry, Bill. Part of the success of anything like this is high quality. And a good example is what we did with Olive and Oak. You need good operators. It starts there. You need people who are really bringing something to the market that people embrace. So you don't want all restaurants, I think that would be a mistake. You want destination entertainment, you want restaurants, you want shops that are selling goods, but you need good operators. And that's what we focus on more than anything, because we're the ones signing on the debt. So it's really important that whoever we put in here, whether it's an office user, a restaurant, we got to feel good about it, because even through COVID, you need somebody who can stand on their own 2 feet. Which good restaurants did. They know how to operate and do curbside, how to do outdoor dining. You saw a lot of that happening that allowed them to preserve, but they were good operators. And when you have this quality of development in this kind of a neighborhood, you have the benefit of enough disposable income that it works if you bring the right people. So we hire really good brokers that engage with us, like a lot of the people, when we go to these developments, we want to see who's out of the market. And sometimes we bring people from outside the community. So you do something different that enriches what's here. You don't want to cannibalize what you have here. You want to augment it and create more density and more really great support to what's here, not take away from it.
I got the 6,000 you got when I read that. And so I was getting the same number, but I was getting the FUP, which said I'm getting 26,000 of retail, commercial in there. And I realize what you're saying. Hey, I don't know if that's going to be a smoke shop or whatever now. But that just seems a lot of retail or commercial in this day and age. And I guess what Jeff's getting at, your answer to that is that you're used to doing this and you know how to find people to fill that. I mean, is the city comfortable that it needs 26,000 more of commercial? I mean, how much unoccupied commercials in Webster now?
I have to remember how many apartments we're putting up. And how many-
I think the issue between what you're saying is you don't have a condensed enough number of people to support that kind of retail the way it wants to be supported. The street level retail that people walk to needs to have people within walking distance. Walking distance generally is defined as 1.3 miles. Put a pin in the ground to a 1.3 mile ring. You don't have enough people that walk here to survive this. You only get cars to do it. And guess what? We don't have any parking either. If you want this place to be successful, we need to help with the parking. We need to help with the people. And if you get enough people in a concentrated area, they will support those businesses because it's convenient and they want to do so. You talk to guys like Trip Stroud, they'd love to have this here. People are not going to walk to Stroud instead of driving to Stroud. They walk across the bridge and come and go. And I think that if you can create the density that we're talking about, you will get the operators to come here. You get mostly service companies, restaurants, people who sell convenience items, things of that nature, no question, but a whole scale of them, not just an Olive and Oak, but somebody who sells at the dime store level, all the way up to the high end like Olive and Oak. But Olive and Oak, as he said, just alone is 24,000 square feet. If you add the butterfly and the bee and you add the elephant, it's even more than that. So we can support the business. We just need to have enough people concentrated to do it. And then we need to make the people who are in their cars comfortable and easy to park. And I think we'll support them just fine.
Well, and I think we hope to draw people from outside of
You bet.
Webster into Webster. And that's what Olive and Oak is doing with this bigger platform. They wouldn't, that's a big enough venue that they're bringing in, you know, people from all over the metropolitan. Because it is a unique event space. And that's part of what you want to create here, is this uniqueness that people can embrace, that they don't experience in normal day. And you need people that are operators that are of scale and credit underwriting. So they need to be substantial. Yeah. Less mom, I would say traditional mom.
And I appreciate the comments and understand that, you know, we don't know exactly what this is going to look like at the shop either. I just want to ensure as we move forward that we're getting something that's similar to what we think we're getting. Right.
And I can tell you that you will. We're committed. We're here. I live right down the street, and I can't even tell you how many times I've walked this site with my dogs and without them. And I have a pretty good vision of what we can do here. It's pretty darn exciting, and I think we can make this the talk of the community, and we'll have people coming from all over to visit Webster Groves, and that'll just help us. I really believe that.
Yeah, you get an opportunity with a bigger platform, so you get really a lot more ability to bring people, gather, park, and do all the things you need to do to capture those size businesses. Can't do it on a street side with no parking. I mean, we struggled with Olive and Oak because we had to really think through all the parking. Here we'll have that kind of thought out. Really, we're thinking long-term, how do we create something that adds value for you, community, and is long-lasting? You can't have turnover in a retail situation, it'll kill you.
I got two more questions at this point. And maybe this is for Mara, but do we know what the current office occupancy rate is in Webster?
I do not know what the current office
Occupancy
rate is. No,
Okay, I
sorry.
would be curious as that. And the pedestrian bridge over the tracks, will that be required to be ADA accessible?
Oh, yes, it'll have an elevator on
You'll have
each
an
side.
elevator.
We're getting some drawings done right now. Absolutely positive.
Yeah, I was wondering how you work the grades out if it wasn't, you
Yeah,
didn't have an
no,
elevator, but yeah.
We're looking for creative, fun designs. We want it to be a fun experience as well as a practical one. If you've ever dealt with railroads, you know, you want to talk to them about our ideas. They say, send us the plans. We'll either approve the plans or won't approve the plans. So we're going to send them plans.
Right. And
They don't want to have a nice engagement. I'd like to put a restaurant up there and let them watch the trains go by, but I don't think they're going to let me do that.
That's all I got.
Sorry.
Tony?
Yeah, thanks. I think Mike asked a lot of my traffic questions, and Jeff touched on actually had the same question about the what they took from the town hall meetings. What I didn't hear him, or what I didn't hear you talk about, was the downsize housing. And I understand having the density and the people to support the retail. I understand all that. I just wanted to know if there was, at some point, was there a discussion with the city when you got to 700 plus units and the amount of retail space you came up with, that, you know, you went to the city and said, hey, this is a lot bigger. We need to make this a lot bigger to make it work. Whether there was a discussion about downsizing it to something that was, in my opinion, more in keeping with the density, or even upping a little bit, but not something not as dense as this appears to be.
So the answer is we rolled out and kind of came to the conclusion on September the 24th. We rolled out our plan back then. We've had many discussions, and I'm sure we'll have many more with city council as we go forward. Nothing would make me happy and more comfortable than if I could just say, hey, 5 stories, no problem, we can make this happen. Unfortunately, we simply have not been able to come up with a scenario where we can afford to do this plan, or that we believe the businesses we put there will be successful. And if we could, we would. You know, one of the answers always is, can we get more subsidies? Well, there's no more economic energy in this project than what we've already talked about. And so as much as I would love to say we could do that, the only way we've come up with to do that is to eliminate really important components like the new thoroughfare, the new street, because you'd have to push everything down, you'd have to spread it out. We can't give up the density, we'd have to give up some public area in order to do that. And we think that's the most important component of this whole development.
Why can't you give up some of the density?
I'm sorry?
Why can't you give up some of the density? I'm not sure that.
Well, it's a math problem, sadly. Things cost so much to build, and you have to divide that by the number of units. And at some point, you can no longer charge the rent or charge the price in a condominium to pay for what the cost is. When you cross that line, you simply can't go forward. You can't finance it. There's no practical way to do that within the constraints of financing. It's just not possible. We're sharing all those numbers with everybody. Those numbers are available from development strategies as well. And that's just what it is, sadly.
You know, are you asking the city for subsidies?
We are to pay for the workforce housing and to pay for the land overpricing, and we are asking for the use of TIF to subsidize some of the costs of this. Yes, sir, we are. We've said that from the very start.
And we still haven't, you still don't have a definitive answer from, you know, the FEMA. I mean, those costs to do all the work along the creek or whatever, drainage ditch, whatever you want to call it, those costs are still kind of outstanding because you don't have all of their comments and recommendations. Is that correct?
Well, it is and it isn't. You know, good or bad, I've been doing this for 42 years, and we have a pretty good idea of what things are going to cost when we're going in and when we're going out. And we've had enough discussions to have an order of magnitude, which is what we've shared. If by some miracle it costs us less, that information is going to be shared and we can give some things back. But there's nothing here that's being done in closed doors. It's all open book and will always be that way. And that's why development strategies is on your consultants list so that you can see and review that information.
Okay. And all that, the tree preservation that you've done all your, I read all the, you know, methods you're going to try to do to save it, but you've come to the conclusion that you just aren't going to be able to save a lot of the trees in that area.
So we had a lot of discussions with our tree consultant, and we can work around trees. There's no doubt about it. The issue becomes is, will those trees survive the disruption given their poor state of health? And also, in addition to the trees in poor health, there's the vast majority of the vegetation is things like honeysuckle, which the Missouri state would like us to get rid of anyway. I think the problem that we're dealing with and the challenge for us is to create a great natural environment where today it's basically just a drainage ditch. And so our focus is on scooping out the bottom of the creek, creating a pond in an area where we can create natural Missouri native vegetation, create a river walk that will allow you to get down into the creek and have an interesting environment that will be fun and actually support some wildlife. Today, it doesn't support any wildlife at all. And we've had tons of people going down there looking, and it just is not a very conducive place for anything that's natural. And so rather than pretend we can save some things that probably aren't going to survive, we'd rather just say, hey, we think this is what's going to happen. Let's come up with a plan that accounts for that and allows us to go forward and create a really cool, great environment with terrace buffers and on each side of the creek and things of that nature. And so that's the plan we're working on. We have some idea what it'll look like. We'll work closely with the city and staff as we do that. And as we get some feedback from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, we'll roll out a real plan. We're getting close to doing that right now.
I would also say that when we redo a site, we think much in natural native plants and really rehabilitate it in what's good for the ecosystem. And you do that certainly with stormwater quality. George, who has worked on all of our projects, is really an expert at that. And we really adhere to that with MSD. And we want to make it a positive experience, not a negative experience back to the environment. And that's always been our trademark. We've built some of the highest LEED certified buildings. And it's part of what you create in terms of a karma and really kind of the sustainability of what we're all trying to do. You know, I see electric car charging and a lot of other things that we can incorporate here that are part of the future. And it's where we all need to head. Be thoughtful about how we impact the world through our built environment.
I would take some exception with some of what's been said. I think the brush and trees that are there, the existing pool riffle structure in that creek, the existing wildlife provide significant ecosystem services. So I would take some exception with the validity and accuracy of that. That being said, the way I read the stream setback ordinance, if you get 401, you get 404, you can get the variance. So that's what it says. But I would take exception. I think a lot of people with some of what you're saying. I've walked through that creek and seen the deer and the pools and the riffles and the brush. But again, with your development, and then if you can get the 4144, you can get the variance. But I even have some exception with some of the staff's analysis, the way that's worded. But again, I think that's yours to get and chase. And so, but I think it just rubs a little bit. Because I do think there is brush down there, and I see deer down there. And all sorts of pools and
Probably be here
riffles.
when we get done too, if not better.
The lake, I wondered, you talked about this pond. Is there gonna be independent water supply for that?
So the way we will do it is with the, it's not fully designed yet, but we can do it by allowing when the creek.
I'm sorry, I can hear you with your hand. up.
Sorry. The way we're setting it up, we're gonna set it up where it'll fill itself from the Shady Creek as it rises, then retain it as Shady Creek falls down. That's the plan. Shady Creek is dry most of the time.
Right.
We're gonna try and create some pools in Shady Creek, so that stays wet as well, but we've done that in other environments where we've had to mitigate for wetlands, and we see that as a wetland mitigation environment as well.
And if you look at like the linear connected waterway in Forest Park, they've got city water to make that up. So I would submit if you run a pond in there, you're gonna have to do some kind of watershed balance to see if it stays wet. And regardless, provide some sort of makeup.
We
water so
will
it don't
for
get
sure do the percolation studies and all those things that will tell us whether it retain water or not. In the past, where we've had a problem like that, what we've done is reached out to NBNR, got permission to drill a well to a certain specified aquifer and pulled the water out of that well. But so far from what we know, given the elevation of the flood and that kind of thing, I'm not sure we're gonna have that problem here, but we'll find out, we'll share that information.
Yeah, I mean, it's a calculation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Straightforward enough.
Yeah.
That I guess on that flood study, if I read that George's report right, that the model got from SEMA was 3 feet different than the published firm.
Correct. This George Stock with Stock and Associates. Good evening. Yes, SEMA has encouraged us to use their model. FEMA didn't have the HEC2 data to give us. We did recover that data though with the City of Webster's bridge replacement of Rock Hill. So there's about 3,500 CFS in the 100-year in the HEC2, and there's about 1,800 CFS in SEMA's model. So SEMA's encouraged us to use, we've got a flood study with both. And obviously there's a large drop in the published flood elevations in SEMA's model by about
From 35 to 1,800.
Big difference.
I
Now,
think that makes large.
yeah, we have it. SEMA is very confident in us using that hydrology. That was one of the first things I told Larry. I said, Larry, because what Larry has learned over the engagement with the city and the residents is we've never seen water at these elevations. And
But
what
that,
he's,
I'm sorry.
but what I'm saying, what Larry has reported to us is pretty much substantiated by SEMA's model, the lower elevations.
I thought that Baptist church, I believe it's Baptist church, or I thought I had read that they had flooded.
Can you say that again?
He had stated that the Baptist church has had flooding. I think there's a differentiation between flooding within basements of existing structures and the seeing the water, come to higher levels above the ground in those general areas.
So you've got a 3-foot difference, but SEMA has told you to use that model. So that difference, I guess it's lower.
What we haven't gone forward with SEMA's model. So the current flood study, which is at a stage ready to make a formal submission to MSD and city. So goes to both those agencies prior to coming or going to FEMA, is based on the HEC2 data. And so the published elevations, the existing conditions, the improvements we're proposing are being measured against those conditions, not the lower one. We have both, but my concern is convincing FEMA of SEMA's hydrology. So it's different hydrology, lower Q. So, if SEMA wants to stand up behind us and push that through FEMA, we would be happy to do that. As I said, we have both studies in place.
Well, Wood's redoing all of the maps
Correct.
now, I guess.
That's
supposed to
who
be done
provided
in a
it
year.
to-
So how does the model you have fit in with what? And I thought in the application was the figure with the differences between.
Yeah, I think Woods is they're very confident in the model. So that's, SEMA's consultant, as you know. But they haven't asked FEMA to adopt their hydrology.
Yeah, you
That-
had
that's
this
what-
figure showing the difference between
That's
the
it.
current and the predicted.
Correct. Yep, that's theirs.
But that should be done in a year or so, I believe, what I get.
Well, and it may work out. And then there would be a huge benefit for the residents along Kirkham, because many of those residents on the north side are encumbered by the floodplain, and there's a big benefit. And that would be a benefit to us, particularly the townhomes. The townhomes that Larry's proposing on Kirkham, currently under FEMA's, are gonna be several feet above Kirkham. And we were just talking about, that's why we have the alley that comes off Rock Hill along the back, and only one place to connect to Kirkham, the driveway. All those townhomes will be several feet above Kirkham with steps that go down to the sidewalk. But under SEMA's model, we'd be able to lower them 3 feet. So we have both. I mean, we've studied the creek in a number of different ways. Part of using FEMA's data is got us replacing the Gore Bridge, improving the Gore Bridge, the arch bridge. Actually, that's part of Larry's proposal, is to go to a 16-foot wide to be able to convey that 3,500 CFS versus 1,800 CFS. Larry and I have walked the creek with the Corps as well. So we're very confident. We walked it in Thanksgiving, around Thanksgiving time with 2 Corps representatives. And they were very supportive of, Larry's vision. And much of it is retaining those pools in the bottom. That's one thing Larry wanted to do, is make sure we retain the pools. The pool that he's showing on the north side is, a terraced bench with a series of stone walls to perch it above the normal flow, let it overflow, hold the water. So the Corps was very receptive to us making improvements basically from Rock Hill all the way to Gore, preserving the bottom of the creeks, which you noticed where you saw those pools and the stones.
If you open that opening up that much, are you concerned about the downstream flooding?
We've
If it's the passing 1,800 now.
Yeah, we've gone, well, right now it's going down. It's just going up around Kirkham and coming right down Kirkham and getting back into the creek. So, I mean, that's what it's doing. It's over, I mean, all of Kirkham's
There's an
underwater.
overland flow path.
It's an overland flow path, just goes up, builds up, goes right around the north side, back into the creek.
So even increasing the opening, you don't believe you'll increase the.
Correct, correct.
So then there was also something in your letter there about adding some detention in Larson Park. That's not the pool you're talking
We have looked at, we've looked at that. You're reading some early data. Yeah, we've looked at Larson Park, some of the non-occupied low-lying areas. Is there a way to attenuate some of the flows into the park and then release them without having an adverse impact? The gain wasn't substantial for what the improvement was. to the park. There's just some low-lying areas that are not, open to the public per se. They're just not conducive because they're wooded. Was there a way to build some weirs or something to divert water into those areas and use it for storage? We did a lot of that analysis, but we weren't seeing a real gain, so focusing our effort in the park, I think we've kind of gone away from that. So
You pulled away from that.
gone away from doing that, yes.
So the pool there is gonna be, and you say a HEC2 model, I imagine it's a HEC RAS model,
Well,
but that.
Woods is, the SEMA model is, but the FEMA is the HEC2 data. It's the HEC2 data. Now we've converted it, put it into the HEC RAS model and then created the corrected, effective existing conditions model. So that's what we're using. We're using the worst case scenario, which is FEMA's, but like I said, I need to circle back with SEMA because it's July now, so it's probably been 3 or 4 months since we talked to them. So I don't know where they are, but they always seem to be a little slower than what we need to be. But if they're done in a year and so they've got the new model, I'm just not certain if they're going to process that through FEMA. Because have they had any public meetings? I don't think they have. I don't think they've gone through their public process. So SEMA's taken on the charge of looking at mapping the whole St. Louis County. So it's not just limited to Shady Creek and Webster Groves. They're focused in Fenton on the Merrimack River. So they have all these models and the data continues to change. And at some point they'll hold public meetings with the municipal, the floodplain managers, in this case, the city of Webster Groves, about adopting their maps, adopting that new hydrology, lower elevations, then take it through FEMA. I just don't know the time frame. And so they encourage us, go do it. Well, I don't know that we need to do all that heavy lifting to try to get them to adopt the hydrology if we stay the more conservative. But that's something I can continue to discuss with Larry.
I guess that's one of the parts where I was certain where that heading is how they're remapping. And the difference in these models might drive the timing on your loan or.
Yeah, I think
concern.
So this plan,
any kind of schedule.
Well, I think, one of the things I've worked with Larry and I've worked with Phil, like they said, he's 42, so I'm 36 years. And I've been with Phil, all of those too. So I work with these guys. That plan keeps getting perfected. They're continually, from engagement, public comment, the pool, like the little pond. I think that's part of trying to address what you observed in there, how to restore it, how to put some back of that ecological benefits into the creek. So he just gave that to me a couple of weeks ago. So that's not yet in the model, So I said, Larry, I'm ready to go. Larry says, well, wait a minute, we're going to make some more changes. So we haven't made the formal submission. We made a conceptual to MSD a year ago. We haven't made the formal submission to MSD yet or the city on our flood study. And part of it is just this meeting. What do we take away? What kind of comments? What should we be implementing? The park and the plaza has changed. Some of the enclosure of that is a little bit longer. So we've had to take that into account into the model from what it was before. So a lot of it is just listening to the city, Larry conveying that information to us and us just trying to perfect a plan for the best way to manage both the flood and stormwater conditions of floodplain.
We normally wouldn't have to call on it through the zoning.
You normally would not. Yeah, normally we wouldn't be doing the flood study till we got the zoning. So, we are doing a flood study only really to be certain and address questions of the city, is why you're advancing the flood study. And, like I said, we're at the point where we can make a formal submission to Public Works and MSD to get that input. But until we have both agencies' concurrence, we don't ask the city to sign the form and send it to FEMA for review. So it's usually.
I got you, but
yeah.
here you've got a remapping, you've got a study with 1,800 versus 3,000.
It's a big difference. It's a big difference.
It seems like there's some moving balls in the air that.
Well,
it's hard to inspire.
Well, both studies are done. I have no issue running both studies in parallel. It's just, I'm not sure SEMA has stocks back when we go to FEMA, because I didn't create the hydrology. They provided it to us.
I'm sorry, we've taken the approach that we're gonna take the most conservative position we can, so regardless what happens, it'll only get better. So that's the approach we're taking, based on the data that we can find. I've had George go upstream, downstream, more places than he really wanted to go to make sure we had it right, because what I didn't want to do is start down the road with a project that had major changes. So the worst thing that's gonna happen if we go down the route we're going, SEMA's gonna put out some new numbers and the flow elevations are gonna go down further. That's the worst thing that can happen. It won't change any of our design. Maybe would have made it less expensive for me in some way, but that's about it.
Okay.
Stick with
This-
this.
Michael, let's let somebody
3,000.
else ask some questions, okay? Maddie?
I did have a couple questions. I think you've answered them a little bit through the way. At our last meeting, I'm assuming that you attended the meeting and heard all the questions. And I I think
Thank you for doing that, by the way. It was a tough and arduous meeting.
that's okay. It was important, and it was important for people to be able to have public comment. That's why we're here. So you've talked about a lot of the things, and one of the things that you said is that you've done a good job addressing many of the concerns that you've heard from the public, except for scale. That you couldn't do much about the scale because of the price to build it. If I got that correct.
Yes.
Okay.
I believe
Thank
that's
you.
correct, yes.
Okay. So that's where you kind of see an issue. So one of the things that I haven't heard addressed, because we've talked about traffic and we've talked about parking and we've talked about scale, but one of the things that kind of stuck out to me as you first started presenting is you were saying that you wanted a place that was 24/7, 365. And one of the reoccurring concerns that I was hearing in the last meeting was about people who bought their house around this green space, and now there's going to be a big development there, and they're concerned about a lot of the things we just talked about, and also about noise. So I just wonder if you could share a little bit about your thoughts about the loss of just the empty green space and the noise for those neighbors that will be living near the development.
Well, I would suggest to you, and the road is probably the one exception in the gathering space where we've created public places for people to go. The total amount of area of just building footprints really hasn't changed dramatically at all. It's just been organized and put into, I believe, a friendly development format. The green areas along Kirkham remain pretty close to the same. And when I say 365, 24/7, I don't mean that it's going to be energized all the time. What I mean is if we take it from something that is private, which you really can't access, and turn into something that's public, you can access. If the city wanted to put controls on how many operating hours the gathering space had, we would do that, of course. But if they wanted it to be open for other purposes, we would do that. We believe if you create open spaces that you can see and light up, they will become safer spaces. They will become attractive spaces. And that's what we're trying to do, is attractive spaces for the pedestrian user. And that's our goal. Are there more square feet of buildings? Yes, it's because they're going up, but there's not a bigger footprint of buildings on the ground. I think if you do the math from what's there today, and the buildings that are there today are largely not doing a whole lot. There's a handful of really good old businesses that we're having great discussions with, and a lot of buildings that are sit there really not doing anything at all in terms of being occupied, or it's an empty paved parking lot or things of that nature. So we believe it's an upgrade to what's there today, but everybody will have their own opinion about that.
And then just around the noise, because it is a lot going into that area that we want to be occupied, is what I'm hearing. I just wonder what plans there are to kind of address all that additional volume for their surrounding community.
So are you talking about people? Are you talking about, I mean, when Development Strategies did their study, they did things like, how does it tax the existing services that have to be provided? Police, fire, the school district. The school district is not concerned about adding a bunch of kids to the system. They don't believe this is going to be largely occupied by
families, I think it'll be largely occupied by the bookends, young people coming in and older people, the kids that moved out. We did hear that the fire department would want a new truck so they can access the taller buildings, and that's in our budget to buy them a new truck. It's just in there because we listened to what they said. So I don't believe we're going to put a huge tax on city services. I will tell you that one of the things I figured out is that this land area represents about 0.5% of the land area in Webster Groves. And it has the chance to contribute to the economic benefit of the city to the tune of 10%. So you can actually look at this area as a net contributor. Think about simple things like we collect our share of the St. Louis County sales tax pool based on what? The number of people who live here. Well, if you add people, you get a bigger share of the St. Louis County sales tax pool, as an example. We will improve the real estate tax picture over time. We will improve the utility tax picture immediately. Utility taxes are a big benefit to the city and the way their budget is set out. And so I think right out of the box, there's an overall net benefit that simply grows over time. And the one thing we can't measure in those studies is when you bring these people here and they spend their money in town, we don't get to ask people how much they make or how they spend it. When you bring all those people and do it, we know the businesses will be successful. We know they'll contribute to the entire community. And so we believe just having those people here will help the overall economic benefit of the community. If we didn't, we wouldn't do it. It would be crazy time for us, honestly.
Okay, thank you.
Is that helpful? Thank you, Bill. Steve?
Well, I think also if you were to walk in one of our residential developments, it's not noisy. It's actually a peaceful place. It's a sanctuary. If you go into Chroma, you walk into the courtyard, it feels like you're in an oasis. And that part of that is the amenities that we create that really allow people to kind of be outdoors and be just enjoying the day or taking a walk or strolling or biking. So I think, it's a misconception. You get all this noise. I mean, I'm down at our project all the time and it feels very serene and kind of a special place.
I think they were talking about during building.
Yeah.
I mean, the one lady was, she commented, when they were doing the construction of it, not necessarily after.
There'll be a certain amount of
But
that.
there will be, I mean, which is part of it. Michael, what is your, the percentage of rental to percentage of condominium owners?
Well, we don't know that just yet. And every time you do a condo, you lose a couple of rental units on average because condos are just generally going to be bigger. That's just the way the market is right now. Right now, we're looking at about in the neighborhood of 200 condominiums, we believe, and in the neighborhood of about 550 to 600 apartment units. We don't know the exact mix yet. We've done some market studies. We're now getting some information that suggests maybe our unit should be a little bit larger than what we originally thought. And so that would bring the unit count down a little bit. And we'll be constantly reacting to the market. We've shared the demand information with the city for the market study. We don't want all of it to be public, but we're willing to shift. So we want to come over and read it and not take it so it became public information. We'd be happy to do that for you as well. It'll be largely market driven. The other thing that we have is about 10% of our units will be what we call workforce. And so I don't know how you would explain that in your thinking of that, answer to that question. We have Joel Oliver here to talk about that component. I think it's one of the most important things. I know Green Street as a company is embracing that really everywhere they go now. It's the same way we do diversity and inclusion in our construction work.
Well, you want the people that work here to live here. It changes the whole chemistry of a place. If the people in Olive and Oak live here, they're committed to the community, they feel like they're part of it. Same way with your teachers. If they're driving from 20, 30 miles away to come here, it doesn't have the same community impact. And I think diversity is a real important ingredient, having inclusion and kind of a representative neighborhood rather than skewed in one direction. And I think almost every city is faced with this challenge. And so we're doing a workforce housing fund that really focuses on market rate, but it's done through impact investors that will take a lower return, that we can do this, or we use incentives to help augment that. And Joe, maybe you could make a few comments because he's helping us do it in Madison, Wisconsin, Boulder, Colorado, Colorado Springs, Arkansas, and a lot of other cities that are coming.
Hello. Yeah, it's always a fun anecdote. My family's lived here for 17 years now. My wife's been a teacher at Hickson for 19 years. And when we were 23, we lived in South City, and she's like, work in Webster Groves. It's so great. I love it. I want to live in Webster. I was like, well, God love you, honey. That's too bad. And we were fortunate enough. We bought a house on foreclosure when they were redoing Kirkham. And so we lived right up Kirkham for 13 years. So what we see everywhere we go in the country is you have this problem of people who want to live in areas like Webster that have good school districts, that are safe, that are centrally located. That's really hard to do. It's not a Webster problem. It's an everywhere America problem. So I played in the low income housing tax credit space for 6 years. It's a great product. It serves a lot of benefits. Webster has had one of those projects once up in North Webster, which most people don't know that. But it's a very specific tool for a very specific problem. And I guess 2.5 years ago, Phil told me, you need to figure out how to do this naturally occurring workforce housing that doesn't use tax credits, that doesn't use state, federal subsidies. So we can go in and do impactful projects for communities. And we're working on that in 8 different cities around the country now, because cities just like Webster that say, we have this robust economy. We have, teachers, firemen, servers, retired people who want to live in these places and they just can't afford it. So we believe it's hugely impactful. It's driving everything I do every day, and we're excited to do it here. And like Larry said, the metrics are really hard and it's different in every community. It just so happens that a starting teacher salary here matches up very closely with what is defined as workforce housing. So we believe it's really important. We're like Phil said, really proud of what we've done with Olive and Oak. It's hugely impactful to our community. And what the owners have told us repeatedly is what's really unfortunate is when I have a server that gets off at 12:30 at night and has to drive half an hour home. That's not great, right? Like if they could live here and their kids could go to school here and they could shop at Schnucks and play soccer at Veta, that's better all in all for the community, because then they go to work, they live here. So that's what we're trying to do on that front. And we're excited to have a venue to do this. The reality is it's really hard to do. It's expensive to do. And without having density and scale like this, it doesn't work, right? I mean, I could go build market rate apartments all day long anywhere and make more money. It's just simple economics, right? Because there's not a state tax credit or a federal tax credit or some subsidy that naturally goes along with it. You have to find a way to kind of fit the square peg in a round hole. So I'm happy to answer your questions if anybody has any on that.
I have a quick question. You say, are these subsidies on the rental units, or are they the owner occupied? And about how many units are we talking? You're saying 10%. Are we talking 100? What kind of numbers are we talking for the workforce housing subsidies?
Yeah, so I'll let you supplement this, Larry, but on the workforce component that we've talked about, this project is geared towards the rental units. Because that's the model that we're using everywhere. That's not specific to Webster. When you get into home ownership, there's just barriers to entry that make that more difficult in any ownership product. And the number we've always said is 10% of the total unit count.
About 70.
Yeah, so it'd be about 70 units. And we've heard some of the feedback. So people have said, what's the feedback here? People go, oh, 70 units, that's all. I can't believe you only do 70 units. And I'd say, well, that's 2 full L's of the L apartment complex. I would like somebody to tell me how somebody else is going to come build 2 of the L in Webster Groves at a subsidized rent. And the simple answer is nobody's ever going to do that, because it's impossible to ever make the economics work if you're just doing that product.
Yeah, and I would also say the reason that you're seeing this, focus on rental units is the resources out there that help us are helping us by taking a lower return on investment. When you sell something, that's it, you're in, you're out. And so you would have to subsidize a new construction condominium to the tune of $300 a square foot, and it's just not even remotely possible. Now, that said, we're working on a couple of ideas that might offer some ownership options, but you have to remember, ownership means a down payment and some other things that we're trying to create an environment where people can work up to the point where they can save their money and make their down payment and do their life and move on. Or you're a fixed income person where
a rental is just fine. You don't want the responsibility of ownership anymore. You want to be able to live there for a good, nice fixed price. And so that's the reason for that focus. I wish we could be all things for all people, but it is an opportunity to do something that hasn't been done in Webster before. And I frankly can't think of another way to get it done at all. So that's where we stand on that one.
All right, so my next question would be then the rent, what would the rent be about? And then the condos, what would they be selling for about?
So-
I know you don't know the number.
Well, but so it's really important. So there'll be different units and different things, but right now, what do we have as a comp for new condominiums that are highly amenitized? Because there's nothing like that here in Webster Groves. So I'm gonna say a bad word, Kirkwood, because we've got some comps over there that are reasonable, okay? And so it would not be unusual on the condominium sale market to see numbers in the neighborhood of $400 a square foot when they cost $350 a square foot to build. On the rental side, you'll see a range of rents. Of course, if you're in a 1-bedroom, a 2-bedroom, a 3-bedroom, all that's going to change. But if you look at something that's workforce driven, that's going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of $900 to $1,000 a month, which is well below what the L charges if you were to check on
Right,
that.
I know.
And it's something that someone who's making $42,000, $44,000 a year can afford to pay based on the metrics that we understand to be true. So that's really what our goal is. Market rent will be what market rent gets. I'm guessing in the low $2 a square foot range. So if you're doing a 3-bedroom, it'll be a much higher price than a 1-bedroom or even an efficiency. One of the things that I know Phil's been experiencing at some of his recent developments is people are looking for smaller actual units to rent and looking to the complex for the amenities that they want, office space to work in, pools, workout centers, club rooms, and things of that nature. So they focus heavily on the amenitized space. They even, in some cases, have people that help them, organize events. They've got a kitchen one, so people can have parties and bring people in and do that kind of thing. So it's really geared to give you all the things you would want to have entertainment space at the same time, a living space that's easier to maintain, affordable, and it's there for what you want to do. Eat a little bit, sleep at night, and get ready to go out and have another good day.
What's your guess of what the rent would be for a 1-bedroom apartment?
So if the, it's probably in the neighborhood of $1,200 to $1,400 a month on the market rate side, and on the workforce side, I mean, it's about something like that, yeah.
So it'd be this, on the workforce side, it would be less?
Oh, yeah,
How
as I
much
just
less?
said, it
What
probably
would it
900 to
be?
1,000, I'm sorry.
What would it be? What, I mean,
900 to 1,000 instead of 12.
instead of 1,200?
Yeah, it would be based on basically 30% of your affordable income is what people can afford to pay for rent. This will be focused on that.
I'm just kind of focusing my question on the other people.
Right, so right now, if you were in 1,000 square feet, let's say it's 1,000 square foot unit, that'd be what, 24, can I do the math? So it could be anywhere from $1,400 to $1,600 a month. Some spaces where they have extra rooms, a little more, some spaces where they have less, a little less.
And what would the condos cost?
Well, the cost is about $350 a square foot. We believe
Cost
it would.
a person who's buying it.
I would guess in the neighborhood of about plus or minus $400 a square foot.
But what would
The average size.
What would it cost?
So if it were
That doesn't tell me
1,500,
much.
I'm sorry, if it was $1,500 square foot unit, it would be about $600,000.
The townhouses?
I don't know the townhouses yet. We're working on those. We're pricing them. We're struggling with those right now. And we may just do a handful of single family over there. It would be permitted, but we don't know those yet. We focused on the bread and butter that would make this thing function. There's only a handful of units up there. In today's market, material prices are jumping all over the place. One week you get a price that's here, next week you get a price that's there, and managing that's been quite a challenge, but we're focused on it.
So the subsidies for the working workforce?
Yes, sir.
Department, that comes from you? I mean, is it?
It'll somewhat come from us, but it really comes, for example, Phil's company has a fund that will invest money at a lower rate of return to allow that to happen. We will look to other banks.
So
that
this firm would also be a part owner with you then?
Sometimes they'll be owners, sometimes they will help us finance it because they have a mission to finance things like this. There's a program that's being used on the East and West Coast with Fannie Mae that offers a takeout loan at a heavily reduced rate that we're looking into with Stifel Nicholas, who's looking to finance the infrastructure with us. using bonds. There's a lot of different ways to do it, and we're going to chase each one down. And I suspect that what we do in one building will be different than what we do in the next building. They'll be different than what we do in the third building.
And these buildings, are they all mixed, some rentals, some condos, or is
No.
this one's only a condo, so are we doing that last first?
No,
How's that
we'll
work?
come out of the box. Our plan right now is to come out of the box with a condo and one of the apartment buildings immediately. A little bit of both and see what the market will say. Our plan is to start on the west by Rock Hill and move east. At least right now, that's what we're suggesting.
And then my last question for you would be, so the garage is underneath the whole complex? the
That's
way I
correct.
understand it. How many exits are there out of that garage? I know Kirkland's one of them. Is that
That's
gonna be
correct.
the main one?
So that'll be the largest entrance. The way we're set up now is there's an entrance on Rock Hill on the northernmost building. There's an entrance on Gore on the northeasternmost building. The rest will either enter onto Pacific, which, as I said before, is one way over to Rock Hill. And there will be a place or two they enter directly onto the new street. Most of those garages are connected underneath the road, so you can get to those entry and exit points.
Would there be any traffic controls on Kirkham to allow for those cars to get out?
Right now, other than some improvements on the intersection, a right, left turn lane and things like that, there wouldn't be anything like a signal at this point.
Or stop signs? or anything like that?
I don't know if we need one. Carrie, I don't know if we can answer that, but we didn't have very much traffic that would warrant one.
Stop on the approach for the garage approach, but not.
Annie, you got some questions?
Annie, you're muted.
I'm right here. I've been writing down all these notes, 5 pages of notes. So I'm just digesting where did all this. This has been very helpful though. Man, I don't have any specific questions yet, but I do, the ideas of like the farmer's market and the river walk and the walk, those are all just ideas. Or I know nothing is like certain yet, but are those things, are there some things that are more certain than not? Because to me, like the farmer's market, I like that. So the walkable.
So let me, so first of all, the Riverwalk would be an absolute improvement we would do in design and build.
Okay.
Find the gathering space or the park would be improvements that we will design and we will build. Whether a farmer's market will be sustainable there, it's something we'll experiment with, or whether art fairs will be experiment with. I've got a lot of experience doing fun, interesting stuff. I'm the developer of 9 Mile Garden. If you've heard of it, you know.
Oh, for sure, I've been, yes.
So by learning from those experiences, we find ways to make these places attractive and grow. We absolutely will have the Jazz Fest there. We've had conversations about that. We would hope to have other performing arts things there. One of the things that I'm doing at 9 Mile Garden, which I think we could easily do here with the stage, is roll out a nice portable TV and have movie nights and things like that, which are a huge amount of fun for people to do. And it's really making it family oriented. And part of getting that done right will be how we build some restrooms into the adjoining building so people can have modern restrooms. People really don't like porta potties and things like that. I've learned you can do it, but it's not a particularly good solution. But we'll make sure we take care of all of those kinds of things. But yeah, we're committing to do all of the infrastructure improvements and we will build the buildings eventually. You'll just see some interesting design changes and we'll make some tweaking along the way. But I really believe that we want that street to feel like a more historic street where each building is individually designed, gives you a different feel as you walk by it, and focuses on what's going on in the streets. So your focus is on your experience with the other people within the community. That's where our heads are.
Okay, and another question. So I'm from Chicago, and like our streets where I lived were brick roads. Have they thought about having, because like in St. Charles, that I don't know if this is when we should be talking about it now, but that's something that kind of makes a street really unique and different, is like a brick road. Is that something like a different that they're thinking of, or is it all just going to be concrete?
Oh, no, no. So if you're talking about the materials on the ground, we expect to have a really interesting, robust bunch of different materials down there. I think one of the most fun things we're going to do is earlier on, I had a slide about history telling.
Yes, I saw that. Yes, yes.
We will tell the history, not only through physical structures above ground, but we'll be doing it, for example, on the street grates that are around street trees. We'll be doing it in the pavements and the concrete, and we'll have other materials throughout the area. It'd be nice to be able to take pockets that are associated with like an outdoor retail space and making that different than the one next door, so you can see where the limits of it are. I think you'll find that the outdoor materials are going to be pretty exciting and fun.
And then my other question is, how have you been communicating with the businesses that like might have to move or will have to move?
So we've had several meetings with the existing businesses here. I can't remember the old Webster business. What are the names of them? Are that we talked to? I'm sorry.
It's okay. Old Webster Trade
Trade
Association
Association.
and the Old Webster Special Business
Yes.
Tax District.
Yeah, there's a lot of different names, but we've been meeting with all of them and we'll continue to do that. You know, one of the things we really want to do is make all of those businesses successful so that the new ones that come along can be successful along with them. It doesn't do us any good if we hurt the existing businesses. That's not our goal at all.
I think that's all the questions I have at this moment. Thank you so much.
Sure you'll all have more questions and I'm sure we'll be back here to answer them as many times as we need to be. So keep going, sir. Is there others that we've heard from? I'm not
I have one last question.
Yeah.
For this is maybe silly, but for the permanent pond, have they thought about like, I mean, this could be later on, but in that winter, do ice skating on it?
Haven't given that even a little bit of a thought yet. Interesting idea.
I think that'd be amazing.
The community space, is that gonna be by, I know you're putting it in, is the city gonna take that over?
So here's the way we envision it now. All of this area we envision as a common element of our entire development. They will all sustain and maintain that. Over time, the city may want to take it over as a public park, which would be fine. If they don't, that's equally fine. But we want to make sure it
You'll donate it
operates.
though, right?
What?
We'll donate it though.
Of course. Oh, yeah, no. We would, but you know, right now it's important to make sure it operates properly, that things are organized, and we'll have a management company that will take care of those things. The city's not set up really to do that, at least not that I know of. Maybe in the future, I don't know. But we want to make sure it runs exactly right. We want to make sure that the streets are maintained and all of those good things. So our plan right now is to have it be a common element of our development.
We have our own community director on a lot of our projects so that we do engage the tenants in all kinds of activities throughout the community, because it really connects everybody, businesses and people together in a wonderful way. We do it with Urban Chestnut, Rockwell, Beast, all these different entities down there. They're all, it's a community that works together and it succeeds by everybody's good effort. And it, you know, we manage everything we do so that you get results. You don't turn it over to somebody else and hope it runs a certain way. We want this to be something that's representative of us, but also the quality of life in Webster.
You referenced a different space. What was that space that you referenced? Maybe you, sorry, that was pretty broad. You referenced like a similar development to this that you enjoy going to.
Well, we have done a lot of development in Midtown, around Warshu, BJC, Cortex. So we have in progress probably 10, 12 different developments. And they all have elements of living, destination entertainment, restaurants. It's part of the character we're trying to build. And I kind of look at the broader neighborhood. What isn't there? How do I create something that people embrace, that also brings energy and excitement and people into the neighborhood? So we're doing Arcade, which is a dog park, and it's a restaurant bar, but it's an incredible experience for people and dogs. And its investor is Marina, and people that are very passionate about pets and a good lifestyle that comes along with that. And it's amazing the people they draw. In Kansas City, where they opened up, they had 250,000 people that showed up in the first year.
Yeah.
And it's a happy place. You know, it's where dog and man come together, or your pet, and you just enjoy that that great experience, and they have people that staff the whole grounds, so you don't have to sit with your dog. You can go have dinner or a drink, or you can do other things, but you have to be there. You can't just leave and leave your dog. You can disappear for a day or so.
Pick 'em up Monday.
Yeah, I don't think we were trying to say we're doing anything. This will be a completely unique environment. I think we're just trying to explain that we'll manage it so that it does all the things we say it's going to do. It's really the real point.
I've been to one of those dog bars in Dallas. They're pretty cool.
Well, this one you'll have to see. It's going to be it'll be spectacular.
Tony, you still there?
I am still here, and I guess I have a question, comment. What you're proposing is a very urban development in what I would consider Webster as being a very suburban community. At this location, and do you think this is a good transition to our city, our central city, or do you see this as a new downtown for Webster Groves? I mean, talk about the transition of this to our old Webster Business District.
So I think it will encourage the old Webster Business District to continue to evolve in ways that it isn't doing right now. I don't want to call it downtown or urban, but what I do want to say is when we look at suburban America and the things that they're trying to do to prepare for the next 20, 30, 40 years, they're needing to create choices in their living experiences that they don't now have to stay relevant and to keep themselves making their existing residents happy, their new residents happy. And when you can do it in a fairly concentrated and confined area, it gives you the economic energy and gives you some amenities that you don't now have without sprawling it all over your whole community. So you can keep your entire community's feelings and experience intact, and at the same time have a central point where you can have the economic energy and do it in a way that it can survive and be relevant now and well into the future. And right now, I don't think that the old Webster area we have, or Old Orchard, is particularly relevant going forward in the next 20, 30 years, and won't support the people who want to stay in Webster, who have no choices now to stay unless they want to live in what I affectionately call a green donut, a lawn around a nice new building, and don't want to take care of their lawn or their house anymore. And, you know I fit into that bucket here pretty soon. And I really want to have a place where people who work here can live here. And that's the other big component we have with a development like that.
And I mean, I understand that, but I also know that the attraction of a suburban community, especially like Webster, is home ownership. But I do understand having the mix of, apartments and condos. I know that that's important, but I still think that the attraction to a suburban community like Webster is home ownership.
But I would suggest to you, you couldn't turn this into a bunch of single family homes right now. I don't think it would work right here. We're not going to take away any of them that are here today. And so all of what is Webster remains intact. We're just adding amenities and other improvements that'll benefit all those people living in those single family homes and giving others an opportunity to stay or move into Webster is what I would suggest.
Well, I think one of the things you made a comment early on was the bookends. It's the older generation, the younger generation you're missing. And I think this complements it in a wonderful way and adds amenities that all people will enjoy.
Right.
And they're focused on creating community impact and community engagement and interaction with each other and being something of high quality.
Okay. Any more questions? What's the height of the tallest building?
Well, it's less than 608 feet above mean sea level. The road is on angles, but
From Main Street.
Well, so something that's facing north on Main Street could be as high as 7 levels off of Main Street, but it's lower than the Allen office building. Anything facing south.
What's the height?
Well, but
Is it
I'm
70
trying to
feet,
answer your
50 feet?
question. It's 5 stories. It's going to be in the neighborhood of 60 to 68 feet. 7 stories going to be in the neighborhood of
80 feet, but from where you measure from a lower spot going up.
From the street.
Main Street. Main Street is, there's gonna be an 80-foot.
Facade looking north and a 60-foot facade looking south.
I thought your figure showed 80 feet on the one side and 60. on the
60
other.
feet, you said?
The Main Street's right there in the middle. So
Okay.
And it won't be
60,
Main
80,
Street, we
68.
keep calling it that, it'll be a cool name pretty soon.
You called it Main Street.
I know, I did, I think we can come up with something a little more creative than me.
I hope so. Maybe Douglas.
No, I think even better. Anyway,
Other questions for tonight? Sure, we'll have more questions.
we'll be here. We have a handful of questions I've heard, which we'll respond and do a responsive writing, give us some things I've heard that you wanted to follow up on those right away, and send them tomorrow. You got nothing to do with take more information about this.
All right. All right. Do you want to present this to me with a question?
So I do have a PowerPoint presentation. However, there's a couple things that you can think about. The presentation goes through what's in the staff report, which has been available on the website for this last few days. I believe that a number of your questions just built upon what staff had already put in the staff report. So I could very quickly just sort of flash through those slides just to show you the key points that we were trying to address. And then they can bring to us both the answers to the questions we had as well as the answers to the questions you had. And we could do a more full presentation at the August meeting. Or if you just wanted to stop, we're at
10 o'clock.
Okay.
Mara, is it another option to have an additional meeting?
Well,
in between?
In between?
I'm just thinking we're also going to hear public comments at the next meeting that will make for a very long meeting.
Well, there's a couple options. One is today was and again, I said this last time that we didn't have any other applications, but today was the deadline for Plan Commission. Oh, we did get one? Okay.
And we have a revisit. of
So we have a
the-
revisit of the other one and we have that one.
An easy one.
Yeah.
So yes, we could look at, our problem is gonna be, well, there's a couple things. One
Dates in the first place.
is dates in the first place
Yeah.
to see that we have enough members,
Yeah.
as well as dates that are available for council chambers. So those are a couple issues that we'll have to address.
Okay.
In addition, we're coming upon summer, which is harder. People are on vacation. So we always try to put those out way in advance
Yeah.
in order to ensure that the public is able to attend.
Right.
Obviously with it on Zoom, that helps a lot.
Yeah.
But our times in between,
So my thought would be to do your regular meeting, do your staff report at the next regular meeting. And then if you're going to do a special meeting, do the special meeting for the public comment. Because that way you can do what you've done before, which is everyone can attend by Zoom if you're so inclined, and everyone can hear the public comment that way, but it's a more controlled space, as it were.
I think that's a good idea.
we could definitely do that. And then we could advertise ahead of time that we will have that as public comment. The only, again, just a reminder that we have the Plan Commission meeting on August 9th. And if we do something between August and September for public comment, you're hitting up on either the week before school starts, which everyone's taking vacations right before school starts, or the first week of school within the Webster School District. And we've gotten a lot of complaints before when we've been around the same time as people are, are going to visit their schools, the teachers that week and other things like that. So we just want to focus on that a little bit when it comes to scheduling, because we do focus on that when we schedule in August. Looking at when hearings are going to be held.
So maybe if we are going to add a special meeting, maybe we would add it in September.
September, October, so just regular meeting.
Again,
Or
we can
just
think
wait
about
till
some
the
other
regular
options. We can
meeting.
also think about
Okay.
starting the meeting early. As we've talked about doing this before, And so there's a couple different options. And again, I could very quickly go through some slides and just remind you of the key points.
It's up to you.
Go for it.
I will be brief.
We're not taking a vote.
Okay, so a quick reminder, we just talked about the public hearing process. Our staff idea was that we were going to then continue any further additional information requests and advancement on the zoning analysis based on any new information they provided to us, and then get you to the point where you could finish up public comments and determine whether you wanted to close the hearing or not close the hearing at that point. So the key points that we always have to address, first and foremost the comprehensive plan and whether it's consistent with the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan matches is in alignment of what the proposal is, which is mixed use to the southern portion, having some townhouse, which would be residential uses in the northwestern corner, keeping the existing church, which would be located in the exact same location where it is now. And all of that is in conformance with both the updated map as well as the identification of mixed use that was in the development foundation plan. We then always look, because the PC is an integrated mixed use district, it's supposed to be developed per a plan. So just as a reminder, some of the questions that are being asked are probably getting into too much detail. What we're trying to identify here is what are the regulations we want to put in place that would either restrict it beyond or allow more flexibility than what we have in our current code. So starting to ask some of the details on what materials they are, or whether specific events are being held there, and some of those things are not what we're wanting to focus on. We need to identify and focus our time and our energies into things that are zoning related, that relate to numbers of units, required parking, access and circulation. So trying to keep that focus is going to be very important and critical. We did identify in the report some uses that staff felt probably should be removed because they don't necessarily fit with the overall way that this is being developed. So for example, the two-family dwellings are very specifically two-family structures, not attached to one another, and none of the development is being proposed as two-family structures. We have single-family attached for the townhouses potentially. We have single-family dwellings in general and multiple family. Also bed and breakfast facilities, those are more of an idea that someone is renting out their space, but they're only allowed to rent out a portion of it, not the whole thing. So we do not want this in here from a certain standpoint, because there would be the idea that people would think that they could rent out entire units. And we don't want these to just become a series of bed and breakfasts in those structures. We also had taken out a few things that we know we're not going to put a public safety facility there, another fire station or a police station. The adult daycare homes, again, these are having facilities within existing homes. We don't see those in the apartments or condos. We took out libraries, post office, and public buildings, because at this point in time, we don't see those coming in to the way that the area is being developed. And then the idea that drive-through facilities, the overall planning of this is intended to be more walkable. And so the idea of a drive-through and the queuing area and all the additional information that's needed for that, we were taking all the drive-through uses out, but keeping in all the other non-drive-through uses for the office, commercial, and service uses. Looking at parking, we just had a lot of questions in regards to, I know these floor plans are preliminary. They give a series of numbers for us to be able to base off of. But we did have some additional questions in regards to, as we ran the numbers on parking required. And again, we use that 6,000 square foot as a flexible number for us to kind of create a point in time. Does that mix work? And what would those numbers be? And staff does always kind of mix it up. So we do add up, well, what if instead we had 12,000 square foot of restaurant and really only 25,000 in retail? We would look at those and try to see how those numbers work. But we do create a moment in time of what that mix would be, just to give an area to work from of how many parking spaces potentially are needed. We also then looked at how many parking spaces were proposed. Again, it's a rough floor plan, but we do have a few concerns about how some of the numbers were identified in the plan, and just want some clarification on that so that we can identify how many spaces would be provided. And we know it's an evolving project as it continues, but hopefully we can get a little bit more clarity on how many parking spaces would be provided. Staff always thinks about these mixed use developments. I know that they've identified and stated that they would like to provide what meets the code, but we always identify that we don't want to overpark this. We don't want to have so many parking spaces that we're parking for the idea that it's Black Friday and everybody needs to have every single parking space available. We know that there's always a potential reduction, and when there is mixed use, we sometimes go anywhere from a 5 to a 20% reduction in parking based on the mix of uses. We did a really quick number based on, again, that minimum parking required based on that specific mix of uses, took the 10% and put it at a number of maybe needing 1,500 parking spaces. In looking at that, again, if we have some further clarification on what they think can be constructed in a few of the key areas, I think we'll get a better sense of where we are in terms of parking needs and parking availability. Access, circulation, and traffic. You all asked a lot of the same questions that we had. We wanted to have some additional clarification on access into and out of the various underground parking levels, whether those means of egress would be too close to the main street or to some of the other intersections, the proximity of those entrances to the parking structure, and whether some of them would meet the egress for the building code standards. We know that we have some additional historic traffic counts. When we were working with the some of you might remember, we actually went back and looked at those numbers and ended up realizing that there was no change over, say, 20 years in terms of the overall traffic that we had, like on Lockwood. So it might benefit us to look at some of the older parking numbers that we have, because we didn't have that many, and it might help us with the COVID numbers. In addition, I know it was referenced that there was potentially an update to some county DOT data, and it would be great to know if that is now available to continue to move forward. I think we talked a lot about the stream buffer protection, what would potentially be required to allow for some variances from the stream buffer, and what would be required to obtain approval and permits from all the various entities in order to do something related to SEMA or FEMA. And we would just state, again, this is at a rezoning level. So we would just put in that rezoning requirements or regulations that the permits need to be obtained, not into the detail of how much they are going to do or not do and what the differences are between, say, SEMA and FEMA, but more that they would have to obtain the proper permits in order to move this development forward. Tree preservation and landscaping, our city arborist went into a lot of detail in order to just kind of identify some of the tree preservation and what she might require in terms of landscaping. The code would require that a landscape plan be provided that would have a certain amount of landscaping required, buffers, islands, screening. There were a number of things. Those would all still be required because it's already in the code. It would only be things above and beyond that we would want to look at or ask. She had a pretty long list of things that she was interested in talking about or thinking about, whether there were elements related to how you would disturb areas off site, how the new street trees would be installed. A number of these things would be things that the developer could look at, and some of them they might already be planning to do. Some of them might be things that we wouldn't necessarily put in. It might just be a policy that we would think about. So there are two big long lists. I know that one of the concerns that has been brought up is related to the sculpture park. and whether that would be left intact and a connection made to it, or whether it would be integrated. So that would be a question or a concern. We talked about dimensional regulations in the staff report. We wanted to look at all the different elements. So setbacks, we had looked at what the setbacks were that were requested and what we thought might need to be integrated. We had a pretty detailed chart trying to identify what the existing setbacks in the code are currently today, what the city code would require, what staff would probably look at in terms of what was requested, and making sure that existing structures like the church and the historic structure could have their own setbacks. They don't have to guide what happens on that particular street, so they can be their own entities. We also looked at the height. So if you probably saw, we have a little color coded section trying to look at what it was above mean sea level as well as what it was in height, and tried to identify that you can see off to the side, which has been the reference of the property, which is also a PC planned commercial district up on Allen. The Novus building that's attached to the city parking garage is at 63 feet above the roadway. It does have another level below garage in that particular structure, and trying to identify that in terms of in relationship to the other area that's being proposed. We also did a pretty detailed chart about lot coverage, floor area ratio, minimum land area, compared that to some of the other multiple family zoning that we have, and what some of our requirements are in those. We didn't get into very detailed analysis with this because we felt that it was important to address parking, address traffic access and circulation, some of those items before we got into it too much in more detail, but do know the preliminary numbers were pretty tight or close with what you could do if you had zoned this to like a B1, which is the B1 or the B2, the one that's the multiple family with limited additional commercial, in looking at lot coverage, floor area ratio, minimum land area. Lighting standards, we just talked about some of that because I know that noise, performance standards, lighting levels, light trespass into single family residential homes, all of those are important to think about. Our code has a lot of those standards already in place, and we would ensure that those standards would need to be met. Architectural Review Board, I know there were a lot of questions from residents about sort of what they thought that model looked like. Each of the new structures would go before the Architectural Review Board. We could consider if we wanted to add any additional architectural standards, and that is something that we could still look at, but at this point in time, each building will have to be reviewed by the Architectural Review Board. So back to the city process. I went through that hopefully pretty quickly, but the public hearing process, which we would recommend, is you're holding the hearing open to August 9th. We could talk about whether you would like to open it even earlier, say 6 o'clock, especially if we have those 2 other hearings moving forward. And then we could also have a little more time to talk about availability for an expanded hearing date or date available to do additional public comment time.
So we need a motion to continue the public hearing to August the 9th. Is there such a motion? A second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor of continuing, what is this, 21 PC or 4 to leave the public hearing open and continue it to August 9th, signify by saying aye.
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 Is there anybody opposed? And then should we make a decision about starting a half hour earlier at 6? Anybody have?
If we're gonna have to continue the daycare hearing, if we're having another hearing for another item on, I haven't seen it yet, so we'll see what it is. And then continuing this.
Is the other hearing a CUP?
It is.
I will not be. I'm sorry, you'll have to be.
So sorry.
And
You'll be in Florida.
And I believe
You can be here by.
They have
Steve,
Zoom
we
in
take
Florida.
You can zoom in.
Chris.
I'll be at the August 9th. I'll be at the August 9th meeting.
I'm sorry, Tony, you are also going to be unavailable. Is that correct?
No, I'm in for the August 9th meeting.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you.
Could we start at 6? I forgot we could start at 6.
Yeah.
It's fine with me.
It's fine with me.
Anybody have objections to starting at 6? All right, 6 it is.
For August 9th.
6 o'clock for August 9th, and I'll send another email out to remind everybody, and then we'll make sure that the Zoom link, because we will still provide it via Zoom for the public, depending on how we're trying to get to the point. I believe in August, we were going to start opening up City Hall for meetings. We'll have to look and see what our limitations are going to be in this physical space, especially knowing, we had at one point in time at least 40 participants online. And we'll want to make sure we address that carefully.
Am I gonna have to read all the addresses again? That's really.
No, no. I will not require you to read all the addresses again. The next time we open the
We
hearing.
don't have to read all the addresses again. I was gonna say right after you finish, you missed one.
You do realize that he's gonna have to say it in multiple readings when it gets to city council.
I'll figure out a short.
By name only.
And do we have
So-
other business? I'm sorry.
Yeah, so this next meeting then, we will do a full staff report, and the applicant will also be able to respond to questions raised in the staff report as of today, as well as tonight's.
That is correct. So items in the staff report, other items that have been brought up. I would also recommend for everyone who is listening, that if you would like to get us the public comments ahead of time via email, we have both the portal that's online where you can just click a couple buttons and then just enter your information. Or we also have an email address. It's planning@webstergroves.org. That's one that we're using because people have complained that the portal kind of limits how much text you can put. If you have larger text that you want to sending it to the planning@webstergroves.org. If they send it ahead of time, we will try to get those out both to the applicant as well as, to all of you as early as possible. We won't have a holiday weekend again prior to the deadlines. That made it a little bit harder for us to get out the packets as early as we wanted to. We are going to try very, very hard to get the packets out as early as possible again, and hopefully not be as limited as we were with the holiday weekend and with the moving of the planning offices that happened on Friday. Yes.
Okay, do we have any other business?
Anyone have any questions about anything else going on in Webster Groves right now?
No.
Nope.
If you ask.
We know where you're at.
We don't.
Kill you.
You know what?
So not at 10:30.
Not at 10:30. I'm totally in agreement with you.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Seconded.
All in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
Right.
Is there anybody opposed?
Good night, everybody. Thank you.